He counts the heartbeats of a dying empire and hears beneath their thunder a thin signal from a world without starfaring maps. He studies the mathematics of that world's will, convergent tides of memory, a tyrant's silence, a century torn out like a page. He chooses to go. He counts the heartbeats of a dying empire and hears beneath their thunder a thin signal from a world without starfaring maps. He studies the mathematics of that world's will, convergent tides of memory, a tyrant's silence, a century torn out like a page. He chooses to go, not to conquer, but to test whether humanity can stand without the machinery of an imperium. He opens a mirrored translation through the veiled roads, staking his own soul as the fuse. The breach triggers. Night tears at noon above Egghead Island. The sky's blue peeled into a wound of gold. Den Mushi blink in panic as every transponder snail on the island raises its stalks, broadcasting static and prayer in equal measure. The sea climbs grey with a Buster Call's wake. 10 marine battleships write iron lines around the horizon, gun crews bracing on ritual commands. Heat rolls in, light at the speed of light, just as the first counts the heartbeats of a dying empire and hears beneath their thunder a thin signal from a world without starfaring maps. He studies the mathematics of that world's will, convergent tides of memory, a tyrant's silence, a century torn out like a page. He chooses to go, not to conquer, but to test whether humanity can stand without the machinery of an imperium. He opens a mirrored translation through the veiled roads, staking his own soul as the fuse. The breach triggers. Night tears at noon above Egghead Island. The sky's blue peeled into a wound of gold. Den Mushi blink in panic as every transponder snail on the island raises its stalks, broadcasting static and prayer in equal measure. The sea climbs grey with a Buster Call's wake. 10 marine battleships write iron lines around the horizon, gun crews bracing on ritual commands. Heat rolls in, light at the speed of light, just as the first Admiral-class beam lances for the research dome. He steps through the rift as if down a palace stair, robes stirring in an impossible wind, armor lacquered with the memory of a sun. The beam strikes his outstretched palm and scatters into a corona of ordered motes, light caged by geometry. He turns his hand. The motes fall like harmless snow across the lab towers and the foam. Those on the battlements, engineers, junior marines, rogue pirates hiding as dock hands, gape, then breathe. The second beam rips in from a different vector, its origin a man who is light pretending to be a man. The Emperor's gaze ticks once, predicting the arc, measuring the moral in the mathematics. He angles 2 fingers and writes a counterline in the air. The beam refracts along that invisible plane, shearing into the sea, turning spray to steam without touching flesh or stone. A dozen Den eyes dilate in unison. He lands on air the way one might rest on doctrine, an invisible platform defined by Wanda will, then drops to the causeway as the rift seals behind him. Boots kiss stone. The island trembles as blast shields bloom around the main labs, all articulated petals and applied genius. Egghead's voice, Vegapunk's voice, spills over loudspeakers, pitching from brilliance to terror. Unknown entity, if you are a friend of human curiosity, you will keep that curiosity alive. He answers without moving his lips. The island hears him anyway. I am the Emperor of mankind. I will keep you alive. The declaration is plain, not boastful, and it rides a pressure front that presses men to knees and snuffs angry gunner thoughts like candles. Far above, cloud banks reorganize around a center that has just entered the weather. On the marine bridge of the lead dreadnought, an officer grips his Den receiver until the shell squeals. All ships, fire for effect, Coordinate with the Admiralty beam. Cipher pole assets. Engage priority target. Behind him, the fleet's doctrine banners hang. Justice is absolute. The snail's mouth scrunches in a frown as distant command replies with a measured, cold assent. He walks toward the first wave as if strolling through a courtyard. Cannon shells arc, their fuses hissing, noses red with friction. A raised hand is a verdict. The shells slow, not abruptly, but as if convinced to reconsider, spin mid-air, and settle in a hovering ring around him. He breathes out, their casings unzip silently, powder flowing like dark sand into harmless dunes that glint in the sun. Islanders, test kids, interns with clipboards, a woman with oil on her cheek and a wrenched ankle, feel the pressure in their ears pop, and then a strange quiet. A child points at him, mouth O-shaped. Is that a giant marine? The child's grandmother, who never believed in pirates or gods, makes a little sign to ward off whatever this is and fails to finish it, because the sight knits her hands together in awe. Light returns, weaponized, slicing from a man standing on nothing over the water, wearing a justice coat like a cape. The Admiral's gaze is ancient and bored. His photons carve and recombine along math that has killed nations. The Emperor evaluates the rhythm, catches one beam in a palm and another on the gold guard of his sword, which has not yet appeared, and then has, singing with a tone like a choir cut by a razor. He moves once, an economy of line out of step with the theatricality of this sea. The sword writes a boundary in the air, and the lasers clip themselves against it, peeling into auroras that curve harmlessly into the sky. The Admiral pauses, watched through a dozen Den lenses, and smiles as if he's found a puzzle. Scary, he says, and his voice makes the snail's mimic mouth pucker. CP0 ghosts spill from shadow to roofline, masks impassive, the elite of the world government cutting angles toward the unknown. Two-step and stumble when the air thickens with thought. One, precise as a scalpel, continues, drawing a finger along his own forearm to open a room. His name is whispered in secret files. Rob Lucci. He vanishes and reappears behind the Emperor, hand-bladed, Haki wound tight like wire. The blow lands with a thud that the causeway absorbs. The Emperor's neck doesn't turn quickly. It rotates like a planet across a long night. He looks at Lucci as if grading an examination. The masked assassin's wrist quivers where it meets the gorget's edge, Haki crackling against something that rides above Haki and refuses to be named. The Emperor doesn't strike back. He gestures and the world remembers friction, and Rob Lucci vanishes a meter to the left, boots skidding, lungs burning. Do we classify it as a fruit user? A cipher-pole voice whispers into a Den whose eyes shake. Or something else. Another voice, older, calm enough to drink tea in a fire. Report to the 5, but assume devil fruit. Engage according to Immaculate Silence Protocol. The word 5 makes the snail go still. Old fear, older obedience. On the lab's highest gantry, a man with an apple head and a coat that looks like a brain's dream leans on a rail. Vegapunk's eyes have watched gods be unmasked as machines and machines be crowned as gods. They widen now, boy bright. Fascinating, he says to no one, to everyone. He manipulates phenomena at scales that mimic light-speed computation. That sword, it's no. Focus. Youths, evacuate lower habs. He gestures the habitats open. Elevators answer in swarms. The Emperor's gaze flickers upward, tasting brilliance flavored with guilt. He does not yet know this man, but he recognizes the signature of a mind forged around a debt to humanity. You build for man, he says, not with voice. Vegapunk nods, tears unspooling because the voice goes right to the part of him that broke when he compromised with power. I do, he thinks back. A whisper he doesn't know he can send. The sea heaves. Battleships form into a textbook lattice. The Buster-Call's doctrine is simple. Reduce an island to principle. Mortars rise as one. The first volley arcs like a cathedral ceiling. Transponder snails draw little cathedral ceilings in ink on every marine desk across the fleet. Fire, the lead captain says. And so the world obeys with the obedience of powder and fuse. The Emperor slides a foot half a pace forward and meets the volley with a palm turned skyward. The air shivers, the shells slow, then stop, then invert their vectors with a courtesy almost gentle. They march back through the air toward the ships, neutered of death but packed still with kinetic truth. They strike hulls at angles calculated to bruise, not bleed, denting armor and throwing crews across decks. Gasps combine into a sudden human sound. Hope with something like hilarity. A dockhand starts and can't finish because the word saving feels like letting go of a rope you thought was holding you up. The Emperor's face is solemn, unjoyous. Mercy is not entertainment. Mercy is an investment whose interest must be collected later in law and labor and discipline. A shape breaks the water. A girl with wings of dark fire and a face multiplied across a lineage of experiments. A seraphim strikes the causeway, blade black sword cutting for his knee, Lunarian fire pluming from her back. The Emperor meets her blow with the flat of his blade. Then the angled guard, measuring, refusing to cut a girl manufactured rather than raised. She overcommits, blinks at him from behind chillingly innocent eyes, and then he taps the pommel against her temple with surgical precision. She takes a knee instead of a coma, blinking, confusion fighting training in her pupils. He cups the back of her head in a gloved hand with an old father's softness. "You'll be free," he tells her, and leaves the sentence to find its way into this world's grammar. Vegapunk, above, reduces his breath to quiet pieces and holds each one like a note he cannot afford to drop. Rear guns on the third battleship spit chain shot that hiss like angry wind at the causeway to cut the civilians off from the labs. The Emperor sketches a sigil with 2 fingers, and the chain shot falls apart into wet glitter, the iron forgetting how to be itself. He doesn't look. He is listening to the sea. The sea hates him back. Salt spray climbs the air, blown by artillery wind, and the mist touches the gold of his gauntlet. He does not flinch, but the gold dims as if embarrassed, and the air around his hand cools in a rush. A note of pain he files away. He notes the granularity of aversion. The ocean is a distributed null field that bites, not simply drains. He steps, and his boot hits a slick of water. A prickling runs up his calf, a sudden static like fingernails dragged on his nerves. He inhales once, adjusting. Power here is permissioned by rules he didn't write. The sea is a parliament that vetoes what it doesn't recognize. That veto will need to be read into the record of his body. Admiral units close to knife range, the Marine captains chant through snail lines. CP0, harass and contain. Seraphim, Pan Sigma. The island answers with evacuation horns and the whine of mobility coils. Vegapunk's assistant, a steel-jawed satellite with a dented cheek plate, herds interns toward lifeboats that are not boats so much as air bubbles with intentions. The Admiral's light body bends space like a mirage, his voice a cool breeze. "You interfered with marine justice." He points an index finger that is also an executioner's pole. "That makes you a pirate." The word pirate is not a classification, but a spell. It invites 1,000 permissions. The Emperor does not accept the spell. He draws a line with his sword in the air, and the tip sparks against something only he can see. "I am not your systems thief." He pivots his wrist once and draws a triangle that is more Lazarus Pit than shape. Photons respect it like a king they hadn't known they served. The Admiral's beam shatters across it and inks the sky with the quiet outrage of natural law interrupted. The first citizens reach him. Lab hands, kids, a courier with a broken arm and a stubborn jaw. He divides his attention the way a general divides an army across fronts. Each division supplied, none starved. A field blooms, a low walking shield, around their small procession. He sets its lower edge just above the sea. Touching the ocean with his field feels like vacuuming needles into his lungs. He learns while he walks. This world's will comes in waves. Haki, they call it, a mind-body unity packaged for friction. The strong here speak with pressure from their hearts and their fists. The sea punishes those who try to hack the system with a fruit's lie. He will need to write his arguments in this language to be understood. CP0 adapt. One tosses a wire whose first kiss shrieks when it hits gold. The Emperor flicks a thought and the wire becomes a line of ash that his own field refuses to breathe. Another agent, masked like a funerary statue, spins into a technique that writes itself through the air with elegant cruelty. The Emperor nods once in warranted respect and moves his shoulder 90 microns. The technique spends itself on a ghost of him and falls limply to the stones. A woman is pinned by a toppled crane. He doesn't lift the crane. He erases weight, the way a kind word erases a long-held flinch. She scrabbles free, finds her child, and thanks the air because the word emperor won't come, and perhaps shouldn't. He is not here to become a god for rent. He is here to audit power. Vegapunk descends on a rail as if he's done this 1,000 times in thought, and never once in body. We have lifters under the labs, he says out loud this time, voice shaking with the relief of a problem solvable by engineering. I can launch them across the blockade if you can ensure the sea doesn't steal them. He looks at the sea as if he's arguing with an old landlord. The sea is a judge, the Emperor says. We will argue law. He draws a circle in the air, then steps into it. It becomes a disk of shimmering nothing and drops into the water like an idea, rendered suddenly practical. The surface flinches. The disk holds a platform of will that refuses to be salt. Civilians file onto it, eyes larger than the idea of islands. The platform hums under their feet, with a sensation like being told you are safe by someone who has never lied. He thinks of the throne, of a galaxy glutted on his labor, and then does not think of it, because he cannot afford to. Every second here is there. The candle he burns has two ends and a forest in between. A figure arrives that the wind introduces as a secret. Horns that are not horns, eyes older than treaties, feet that prefer soil and have been taught to love marble. The air itself stiffens around him. Even the Admiral's light takes a step back without acknowledging that it did. The Emperor recognizes the resonance immediately. Sacred authority disguised as human administration. The elder descends to the stone on insect legs that are a man's legs. The Den Mushis look away of their own accord, refusing to copy his face, as if some gravity refuses to share. Interloper, the elder says. The word lands on stone and cracks it as if it were ice. You are outside law. I made law, the Emperor replies, and I broke it when it broke man. He steps off his platform with a foot that hardly touches the sea spray. The pain whispers up his shin, and he files it in a desk that already has too many drawers labeled cost. The elder's gaze passes through him and examines everything he cares about, as if for purchase. You will kneel to the empty throne, he says, and the Den who hears him goes blind. Crewmen rub the snail's eye stalks as if they can fix the world by touching it kindly. I do not kneel, I transact. His eyes are not cruel, but they are all at once focused. The Emperor draws from a place unmapped by this ocean, a well that the sea thinks it cannot poison. He pours a thin edge of that into the air, and the Elder staggers half a step, less from force than from insult, a power that refuses to register inside his instruments. CP0 sense their moment and rush, a white blur of doctrinal zeal. The Emperor changes the ground, re-weights friction, so their sprint becomes a glissando. The stone refuses to play. They slide, controlled, embarrassed, like God slipping on spilled oil. He doesn't laugh. He never laughs in war zones. The Admiral takes his cue. Light saturates again, lancing for the platform packed with civilians. The Emperor interposes faster than light by cheating with prediction. What is seen is a man stepping. What is calculated is 1,000 alternate steps killed before they can be born. The beam meets a shield he didn't raise, so much as decide must exist, and tourists of terror become witnesses of reprieve. Codex note: Sea Prism Stone emits a pariah-like interference congruent with known null phenomena, causing warp constructs to fail with a pain signature similar to proximity to an untouchable. A seraphim recovers and shouts a small choked command in a child's voice. Training overrides kindness for 1 second, and the second Admiral Stamp beam spears for his back. He rotates the sword backward through a motion simple enough to teach a novice and arrests it along a flat plane of physics from his birthright. The Gold Guard sings, the sword doesn't, and his shoulder muscles remember battles against giants who were not giants and gods who were. He bleeds, finally, not from the beam, but from the ocean. Salt spray has crept under his gauntlet's seal and found skin, like smugglers find harbors. The wound is petty, painful, honest. He uses the pain as a metro line and rides it to a station called Limit. On the platform there, he posts a notice. Vegapunk makes a decision that costs him a lie he has been telling himself for 10 years. He rides his rail to ground and stands near the Emperor as if that has always been his place. "I am Dr. Vegapunk," he says to the Elder without the courtesy of saint. "This island is safeguarded by my duty to the future. I will collaborate with any power that protects human progress." The sentence alters 3 balances at once. The Elder's eyes do not narrow. Old eyes don't narrow. They remove warmth. "You will be punished for impropriety," he says. "Your invention will be repurposed for correct ends." He lifts a foot. The air tries to help him and then changes its mind. The Emperor walks his gaze across the fleet and counts their men by how they carry their shoulders when told to fire at the unarmed. He finds good men frustrate their hands by polishing brass that is already clean. He finds bad men smile and hide their smiles behind professional frowns. He also finds those who are waiting to be told it is all right to do the right thing. He speaks, and his voice rides the transponder net without asking permission. "Marines," he says in a tone that never has to say please, "you serve an idea called justice. That idea is not owned by a throne. You will not fire on civilians." The sentence walks into hearts and either sits down or is shown the door. Both outcomes identify their hosts. On the flagship, a captain reaches for the order bell and then lets his hand rest there. He looks at the photo of his daughter taped under the helm. She plays pirate in the alley with a wooden sword because pirates are romance and Marines are taxes. He swallows, a thing his throat does without him being able to stop it. He does not ring the bell. The Admiral raises a finger. Light gathers. His lips shape a question he never asks because the Elder is there, and the Elder does not have patience with questions asked in public. The Elder diadems the air with authority. The word fire forms but does not leave his mouth. He tastes for the first time in a long time what it is like to be disobeyed by a universe that is not his employee. The Emperor's attention splits again. a general organizing supply lines. He assigns parts of himself to the rescue, to the defense, to the conversation. "Doctor," he says to Vegapunk, "you will prepare your lifters. I will negotiate with the sea in the state." Vegapunk nods with the grim excitement of a man asked to prove the proposition of his life. He steps to the water's edge and kneels, not in submission, but to place his palm against the theorem. Pain flares, Salt asking rude questions of his nerves. He answers with a gentle denial, shaping a sheath of not touch around his skin that the sea finds either insultingly clever or insufficiently respectful. He smiles slightly because he has always preferred adversaries that force his best work. He writes a circle above the water and then a second below, a matched set of arguments. The circles interlock like two hands on a rail car and then slide forward as a unit. The platform doesn't float so much as refuse to consider sinking. The first lifter follows, Vegapunk's engineering brilliant and earnest, thrusters chewing at air that tastes like hysterical applause. CP0 try again. One leaps, toes scratching a question mark onto the wind. Dagger a black punctuation point aiming at a page the Emperor is writing. The Emperor turns the page. The dagger meets a paragraph that is not where it was. He allows the agent to land, to collect dignity, then removes the dagger from his hand without touching it. The agent does not notice for a second, and then looks down at his empty grip and thinks about retirement. Pirates notice too. They smell a storm, and they smell a creed, and decide whether they wish to survive the former and follow the latter. A boy with a cheap straw hat and a better instinct than luck watches from a small skiff behind a cliff and grins like a door kicked open. One day, he will punch the sky if the sky asks for it. Today, he watches a man rewrite the contract between sky and sea and learns a new verb. The elder becomes bored with spectacle and moves to ending. He lifts a foot and puts it down. The island would prefer to be smaller under his heel. The Emperor steps in, not to block but to obligate, and the pressure meets pressure. The stones crack in circles that look like cropped halos. "Leave," the elder says, "or be erased." He says erased like a man who knows where the eraser is kept and who has access to the locked drawer. "No," the Emperor says, not loud. The no is not a moral pronouncement. It is an engineering constraint. It enters equations and changes their outcomes. The Admiral fires again, not at the Emperor, but at the lifter. The Emperor is already there. Prediction is not prophecy. It is logistics. The beam meets a surface that looks like air. A faint crackle runs across his forearm, a nerve fray where ocean pain and light pressure shake hands and toggle a switch he didn't know he had. He notes the switch. He files the note in a drawer called Pay Later. Marine squads rush the lab gates. The Emperor marks their footfalls and decides to cut the tide at the throat rather than fight every drop. He raises the sword, inhales, and exhales a wave of gold that is not energy, but decision. It does not throw men back. It suggests to them successfully that they do not wish to advance. Knees wobble. Eyes flick to the left. A sergeant sits without knowing why. He does not humiliate. He makes retreat look like prudence because he remembers being 20 and eager and wrong and hating the man who laughed at him. He will not sow a harvest of vengeance here. He has too many harvests buried already under his own palaces built elsewhere. His mercy is calculation and kindness braided, hard to cut even with a marine sword. A scream cuts, a crane cable snaps. A cargo pod swings toward the evacuation line. He is faster than gravity by writing a new schedule. The cable stops, rewinds, and hooks itself properly. The pod sighs and behaves. The child beneath it does not see any of this. The child sees only his mother's face and the sudden safety there. A second seraphim, eyes storm black and mouth neat, charges, blade set to hamstring. He parries and speaks to her alone, sending a line into her training apparatus. You are not a weapon. You are a person. The line sinks into the biocode like a seed, into soil that has been taught to reject seeds. He expects nothing today. Seeds are patient in ways generals cannot be, and he tries to remember that. Vegapunk's first lifter clears the blockade. Surfing a rail of air, he reinforces with a hand the way one might steady a ladder with a palm. Marines watch it go with a mix of shame and relief. They are not used to mercy that lectures them so thoroughly. The second lifter creaks under weight and doubt. He adds a thought to its spine. It straightens, proud. The elder moves again, bored no longer. His pressure becomes an algorithm, his gaze a floor plan for catastrophe. The ground within 10 paces of him forgets strength and becomes an opinion. The Emperor meets him there, shoulder to shoulder with a man who is an institution. The contact is less a clash than two constitutions colliding. The Den-Den's eyes roll back. Too much authority in one place overloads mimicry. Across the fleet, men hear static that sounds like old hymns and old screams and do not know which is which. An ensign vomits and then stands and wipes his mouth because he is embarrassed by his body's brief democracy. The flag captain stares at the island and judges himself unqualified. The Emperor feels the sea, licking his boots, and files another memo to himself. Avoid ankle-deep water. He remembers a world where the sea was the only road, and a general who convinced waves to bring armies home. He remembers a different war where water hid monsters. All waters are local, he thinks, and will respect no passport. He pays the toll in pain and continues. He opens a channel that is not sigh, because the sea takes sigh like tide, and not speech, because speech can be recorded by snails. He opens a channel made of obligation and sends it toward every Marine with his eyes on him. You are citizens in uniforms, he tells them. Your oath is to men, not chairs. Chairs are for sitting, men stand. The words are old and perhaps patronizing. They work anyway. On the flagship, an older man with a scar across his jaw stands straighter. He taps the Den-Den and opens a line to the other captains. Ceasefire on lifters, he says, and waits for the echo of his career dying. It doesn't die. It renews itself strangely in the faces of his crew. He thinks, surprised, that he might be promoting them even if he is about to be demoted. The Admiral flickers, arriving in front of the Emperor with mock casualness. You're quick, he says, but are you quick enough? He raises his hand and points it at the elder as if asking permission to break a toy. The elder does not nod. The elder does not nod for anyone. The Admiral fires anyway, because light does not wait for permission once it has been summoned. The beam does not hit the Emperor because he is not there anymore. He did not move. He allowed all possible versions of himself to stand still and then chose the one the beam could not see. When he reappears one step to the left, his sword is between the beam and the platform again, and the gold sings like a bruise being rubbed. He is tired sooner than he should be. The sea leaks into him and does not leave. He will have to sweat it out somehow, or learn to be at home with the poison in him. He is no stranger to poison. He has built empires around poisons and then called them perfumes. He does not like the reminder. Vegapunk satellites, one with a mailman's bag, one with a head like a toolbox, file reports into his mind without meaning to, their thoughts loud over the evacuation. He hears names and guilt, and a single treachery like a nail hammered through a choir note. He knows now that this place's threat is not only from outside. He will triage later. He will fix what can be fixed and bury what cannot. He has a shovel that is also a sword. A cannon round misfires and detonates on the deck of a marine ship. Men go down in a wave of sound. He flicks a palm and a sphere of quiet lands around them, muting fire and swapping smoke for clean air. Sailors stumble to their feet, coughing, eyes wide at the bubble of safety on the wrong ship. One salutes the island without knowing who he salutes and feels stupid and proud. The elder stops pretending. His foot stamps and the island's bones groan. The emperor counters with a step, and the sound knits itself back together, a pain braid. "You are a sovereign from elsewhere," the elder says. "That means you have no rights here." "It means I have responsibilities wherever there are men," the emperor answers. "Rights flow from those." Rob Lucci moves again, personal pride bruised, skills sharp. He vanishes. The technique is elegant, a kit of scissors and string, and people have died to build it. He reappears to put a hand through the emperor's spine. The emperor allows the hand to pass through a ghost and appear on the other side holding its own guilt. Lucci pulls back like a man who just touched a face he didn't know could cry. The second lifter clears the blockade. Marines quietly avoid shooting it because most of them have parents, and some of them became Marines after pirates burned their villages, and they do not intend to become pirates today. The elder feels the disobedience wash against his ankles like insult. He marks names for later. He will erase later. He has time and efforts. He always has had time. The Admiral finally thinks, perhaps, that this can be played like a game. He moves, light in a lazy lattice to the flank, and aims at Vegapunk, who is exposed by courage. The Emperor is already there. The sword kisses the beam into a fan, which spreads around Vegapunk like petals around a stigma. The light turns to rain and kisses hair and lab coat. "Doctor," the Emperor says, as if they were in a study and not in a war. "Your lifters will hold if we interleave them with rails placed at 7-degree intervals to minimize ocean contact per unit weight." Vegapunk's eyes brighten. Engineering is a language in which he can confess without shame. "Yes," he says, "I can do that, thank you." He realizes he has thanked a warlord and resolves to interrogate himself about this later. The elder draws closer. Up close, he is less man and more mandate. His presence hums like a power line crossed with a cathedral. "Do you know who sits above me?" he asks, not curious. "Someone who believes that absence is strength," the Emperor replies. The elder's eyelids flicker. He has been understood too quickly. He hates the feeling like a man hates a wet collar. "Whose justice do you represent?" the Admiral asks, light pooling around his shoulders, as if it's bored and wants to play loops around his neck. "Mine?" the Emperor says. "Theirs." He tilts his head at the civilians. "Justice is not a patron. It is a practice." The Admiral's smile flinches, but only a little, and only privately. A marine cannon may be commanded by a man with too much obedience and too little imagination. Fires at the platform again. The Emperor doesn't turn. He writes a sigil with his left hand backward. The cannonball accepts the sigil and turns in the air like a horse that has been convinced. It lands in the sea, sending spray, sending pain. He breathes in the pain and files a new memo. The ocean wants him to be slower. He cannot permit that desire to be a policy. He will need to construct tools that mediate the ocean's veto. Perhaps he can learn this Haki, though learning is not the right verb. He already has a throne in his head, where will sits. He may only need to adjust rituals. Vegapunk raises the rails, sleek silver lines that hum with practicality. The lifters load with the last of the non-combatants, including a CP0 field cook, who never believed they'd be saved by a stranger. She clutches her knife as if it is a passport. The Emperor nods once at her. The nod sends a letter of recommendation ahead of her into the world. A pair of pacifista move in. eyes glowing with cyborg intent. Their lasers are not an admiral's lazy zen. They are factory anger. The Emperor steps, deflects, steps, deflects. He walks the line between technique and message, refusing to cut down machines that are only machines. He is careful with his language even when it is killing time. The Elder sets his foot again. This time the ground doesn't crack because the Emperor has already rewritten its willingness to be impressed. The Elder's face stays calm. He is offended not because his power is contested, but because his boredom is. "You believe you can teach this world better rules," he says. "I have already taught it rules that keep it from tearing itself apart." The two men face a civil war of definitions. He hears something far away, beyond this island. He hears a throne that is not here but everywhere he is. It coughs, it wheezes. It asks if he is finished yet, because it is old and heavy and made of promises. He sends back a promise of his own. Soon, he lies kindly to an empire and hates the skill. The Elder notices the flinch. He smiles, small. "You are borrowed, not stationed," he says. "Good." He steps in, the heir writing a concession in visible scripts only the Emperor can read. The script says, "Limited engagement." Limited engagements are the ones where the most is decided. He lets himself be driven back a step to preserve the civilian's corridor. He measures the pain in his ankle and calibrates his next 9 motions around it. He allows the Admiral a glancing scoring on his vambrace, not for show, but to test whether light's taste for blood here is the same as elsewhere. It is sweeter. He notes that too. Vegapunk's last lifter rises. The Buster Call stares at it with the long gaze of artillery. The Admiral raises his hand again out of habit. The Elder does not move, but the air around him tightens a centimeter. The Emperor places himself under the lifter's path and holds up a palm that is an oath. He catches every beam and every bullet that chooses to break oath. He does not swat them. He convinces them that they are prayers said in the wrong direction. The lifter clears. Civilians clap. Ridiculous in the middle of a siege. And then stop, embarrassed. And then start again. Not embarrassed. People are not machines. They do what they must to be themselves. The Emperor lowers his hand. He looks at the Elder. "Enough," he says. Not to the Elder, but to everyone else. The Elder tilts his head, curious for the first time. The Emperor continues. "You will leave this island. Your justice has chosen to aim at those who build. My justice will not permit it. Marine guns waver. CP0 gather for a last ritualistic charge." The Admiral raises a hand and then lowers it, just once. A private debate whose minutes are not recorded. The Elder's lips shape a command that will create a massacre and then stop shaping it because he assesses the casualty picture and the narrative fallout. He knows story. He knows how to lose slowly and call it a maneuver. Fine. The Emperor closes his eyes for one heartbeat and writes a message through the sky, not in letters, but in the behavior of clouds. The message says, "There will be witnesses. Witnesses can be dangerous to systems that prefer secrecy to legitimacy." The Elder frowns, a tiny fracture. He opens his eyes. "Doctor," he says, "take those you can to safety. I will be last." Vegapunk nods, because somewhere in his brain is a child who loved knights. He obeys, because men who build must sometimes let others buy time with blood. He hates it. He does it. The Admiral thinks maybe, just maybe, this is tiresome. He tries to be bored and finds that boredom cannot sit in a room where there is too much meaning. He flickers and fires and flickers and cuts, and the Emperor meets each motion with the frugality of a man repairing a city's aqueduct, not a fencer in a theatre. The Admiral, for once, decides to work. On the far horizon, another shape rises. Black sails, a laugh that tastes like oil, a gravity that eats light. The Emperor feels it like a rash under armor, a counter-power that does not argue with the rules but steals the book and sets it on fire. The Elder's eyes flick toward the shape and then back. He does not smile. He does not frown. He recalculates. The buster call tightens, sensing the entrance of a third player. Marines who do not know his name yet will learn to hate it or ride under it. The Emperor knows too many such men. He does not speak the name. He does not need to. He feels the null in the null, the negative of the sea made portable and owned. He drags a breath through lungs that have held 3 suns and almost dropped them. He meets the Admiral's next beam and splits it into sequins that decorate the idea of survival. Civilians are gone, save the injured and those who are stubborn. Vegapunk returns to the gantry, because some men cannot be saved from themselves, and should not be. He will not leave his failure or his success in someone else's mouth. The Elder lifts one hand, and the ships obey. Guns lower, not in surrender, but in a pause. He calculates a delay to allow another enemy to enter the field, to spoil the moral picture and claim contingency. He's political enough to prefer victories that can be described later as necessary. The Emperor, who has been every sort of ruler, reads the play and sets his jaw. "Who are you?" Vegapunk asks, very quietly, as if proximity excuses over familiarity, as if he is talking to an equation with eyes. The Emperor answers him with a trim truth. A man who tried to save everything and built a machine that eats him for the privilege. Vegapunk nods, as if introduced to a mirror. "A pleasure," he says, because he is strange like that. He squares himself to the Elder and the Admiral. "You will withdraw," he says. He doesn't add please. He does not add or else. The or else is the shape of him, standing, a promise most men in this world don't have the vocabulary to read. The Elder weighs that shape against the incoming darkness and chooses to let a pirate be a weapon. The Admiral backs half a pace, not in fear, but to be in position for a clean line. CP0 settle into a low hum of readiness that has more to do with dignity than tactics. The marine guns tilt away from the labs and toward the black sails. The Emperor turns his head slightly, measuring, calculating whether he can protect civilians, confront a null, and instruct a god all at once. He can, but it will cost him. The sea fingers his ankles and takes those fingers all the way to his hip bone. He feels the gold dim under his skin, as if he is an ornament losing its plating. He will not be gaudy here. He will be simple. Simple is expensive. He opens one more corridor for the last stretcher, then retools his field into something less like a wall and more like a net. A net can hold multiple small truths. A wall holds one big one. He will need nets. He will need many nets. Men are not water, but they behave like it when they pour through cracks. The black sails rise fully now, and a laugh that knows how to hurt men who believe in things spools out across the water. The Elder's eyes meet the Emperor's over the causeway. 2 sovereigns acknowledge that this board has too many pieces now for either to enjoy. The Admiral's light dims a fraction, not because it is tired, but because it is rocking on a ship called Uncertainty. The Emperor lifts his sword so the sun hits it and turns it into an answer. He points it at the black sails and then at the Elder and the Admiral in equal measure. "This island does not belong to you," he says to all of them. "It belongs to those who need it." The sentence lands on the water and skates toward the horizon like a promise with skates on. He takes a step toward the sea. The sea bites. He does not stop. He goes to meet the third player because he knows a certain kind of enemy, the kind that makes courts unnecessary by burning courthouses. He prefers arguments to executions. He will try an argument first. He almost always does. Behind him, Vegapunk wipes his eyes once, angry at himself for having them, and gets back to work. Above him, the Admiral shapes another equation in light. Before him, the Elder checks the time on a clock that isn't there. Around them, Marines debate themselves into better men, or worse, and Denden Mushis watch and do not draw what they ought not to draw. He walks out onto the platform. That is also the idea, that the sea can be convinced, and steels himself to argue with the void. Civilians are gone to the clouds. Marines breathe between orders. A black gravity laughs and the sea applauds it with hungry hands. He steps forward, boots on the argument he wrote with circles, and goes to meet the darkness that wants the board wiped clean of rules. The first victory arrives without fanfare. The buster call eases its breath, guns angling away, lifters shrinking to gnats on the horizon. Kizaru's light draws down to a guard stance rather than a guillotine. CP0 break contact in a crisp fold, masks turning to the new vector. The Elder takes a half step back, exactly a half, he always measures, and chooses to conserve his narrative for later. He does not celebrate. He inventories cost. Salt has threaded his right leg like wire, his feel still dims at the edges, and the sea insists on a fee for every thought he puts into the air. He recognizes the familiar arithmetic of mercy. You pay early and you pay often, and if you fail to balance the book, you are called weak by men who never audit their own blood ledgers. The black sails belly with a wind that does not exist. The ship shoulders between marine hulls as if daring them to mind. Its figurehead grins with too many teeth for wood. The man on the prow wears a coat lined in theft and a smile lined in gravity. His laugh is a knife that cuts the idea of fairness and divvies it up among the bold. Zehaha. Teach spreads his arms as if greeting a stage. Shadows around him droop like soldiers dismissed from duty. What a show. I smelled fate and brought a barrel. Blackbeard pirates, a marine whispers to his snail. The words tasting of bad history. Captain Marshal D. Teach, yummy yummy no me. The snail sags, eyelids heavy, as if the name itself encouraged sleep where it should not be. Teach palms the rail. Darkness pours from his hand and eats sunlight. I heard there's a brain to steal and a world to rob, he says. His eyes skitter to the Elder and then away. No deference, just appetite, looking for best value. And you, shiny. The Emperor regards him without annoyance. He has known men like this since the Bronze Age, learned to make iron knives for social contracts. You bring a hole, he says, and call it freedom. Teacher's grin widens. I bring the truth of the world. Anything you can hold is yours. Anything you can't hold was never yours to begin with. Kizaru flickers in, light settling in a lazy curve across the causeway. The worst timing, he drawls. Why don't pirates coordinate with the schedule? He points a finger at Teach, a beam idling there like a cat's tail. The Elder does not disapprove, which is the same as permission. Darkness rises like a curtain. Light hits it and dies with a wet sound. The beam snaps off. Kizaru's eyes narrow a fraction, because fractions are his unit of sincerity. The Emperor takes a step and the sea takes a bite. He writes a new disc and it holds, barely, its edge fraying where darkness licks it. He does not hesitate. He meets the hole with something that pretends to be a line. Teach claps his hands and the hole claps back. The causeway tilts, stone slides, cracks like ice on a spring river. The Emperor lifts his palm, persuades mass to be obedient for a few seconds longer. Civilians still on stretchers are carried back by Vegapunk's steel-jawed satellite, who swears in a soft, exact voice and refuses to drop the last patient. War Council, the Emperor says without looking back. Inside, now. His voice is a bell that rings through the lab's bones. Doors yawn, platforms glide, and the surviving staff fall into the choreography of crisis. Vegapunk hustles into the dome's war room with a handful of satellites. Shaka's calm silhouette, Atlas's bruised will, Edison's nervous intellect, clouds of schematics chasing their heels. A Marine flag captain enters a step later, hat under his arm, jaw set at that angle only men already in trouble adopt. CP0 do not enter. They lean in a shadow and listen with the disciplined theft of intelligence work. The elder does not come in. He casts his attention through the room, as if laying a cloth over a table he will eat at later. Kizaru stands at the threshold, as if the light itself wishes to observe protocol. The Emperor steps into the central well, the room's projectors painting a three-dimensional map of Egghead, the blockade, and the incoming black well blooming around Teach. Vegapunk touches a pad, and the map changes to chemical. Darkness is not just an absence, he says. Its spectral signature eats gradients. It is a negative viscosity. Anything that can flow is compelled to flow into it. The Marine captain clears his throat. Rear Admiral Gion's doctrine would suggest perimeter skirmish, keep him away from civilians. But we are beyond doctrine. He looks at the Emperor and does not quite salute. Sir. The Emperor nods to both. He is an anti-field with a will. My constructs are law, agreed upon behavior, enforced locally at scale. His is hunger, a boundary condition that eats definitions. He keeps his cadence slow to match the room's hearts. We will not let him choose the ground. Doctor, he says to Vegapunk, you will give me rails, not above water, through air densified at harmonic nodes so that the sea and the hull cannot collude. I can generate nodes at 17-degree separations, Shaka says, voice measured as a metronome. Load bearing for 200 metric. Make it 1,000. Atlas snaps and stares at the Emperor's calf. We will not make him choose between dignity and survival on our floor. The Marine captain raises a hand. If I order my ships to pivot to the black sails, the Elder will have me erased. If I do nothing, men will die. He meets Vegapunk's eyes, then the Emperor's. So I will order them to cut their anchors. We will drift. And drift is not firing. It is a small mutiny in grammar. Kizaru taps his lip. If I aim at him, light dies. If I aim at you, he laughs. If I aim at the Elder, he lets the sentence hang like a lantern and then pinches it out with 2 fingers. Not recommended. The Emperor turns his head a degree to Kizaru. Your light is fast, but your decisions are slow only when you prefer them that way. No censure. An invitation. A CP0 voice from the shadow. If we bind him in sea prism chains, his fruit nulls. His crew, Van Auger, Shiryu, Lafitte, are threats you cannot predict because they don't intend to be predictable. The voice hesitates, then adds, we will not deploy until the Elder commands. He will command when public cost is lowest for private optics. The world government, the Marine captain says without heat, believes order is a dam. Pirates believe the river will pick its own bed. If you are who you say, you believe the river can be taught to carry boats. Steel man your doctrine, the Emperor tells him. The captain inhales. We hold the lines. If we loosen, islands burn. 10,000 villages owe their boring days to the terror we keep bottled. Pirates roam, yes, but they roam more because we keep the worst wolves penned. Now Steelman his, the Emperor says, pointing through the glass at Teach. Vegapunk swallows. Freedom is a solvent. It dissolves tyrannies and lies. It also dissolves safety. Men like Teach argue that the only true justice is personal reach. Your arm length is the law. Steelman mine, the Emperor says, eyes moving between them, not to flatter his own philosophy, but to force their hands. Kizaru answers, surprising the room. Responsibility first, power after. A ladder, children, craft, city, then law. You would rather lose a throne than the habit of mercy. He looks faintly amused at himself. Troublesome. And your critique, the Emperor asks him. You build machines that eat the men you built them to protect, Kizaru says. You call it the cost of organizing light. The Elder's attention cools the air. You speak as if councils need your permission. We will cut this island and any tongue that describes it incorrectly. He addresses the room without eyes, a weather system in a human shape outside the window. Mercy versus survival, the Marine captain says, returning to the hinge. If we spare one pirate ship, a city burns. If we burn this one, a child on that ship, who could have been a doctor, dies. He doesn't blink. I signed up to choose. You signed up to carry the weight of my choice. The Emperor takes the weight in his hands like a physical thing and sets it down in the center of the map. We will not let him force binary frames. We will control collateral with constraint, not spectacle. We will win by teaching the ocean how to respect a different oath. Atlas snorts softly. Good, because I'm done letting the sea bully my flaws. The alarm deepens. The map shows darkness bulking, a gravitational anomaly that eats the predictive mesh at its edges. Seagulls that had been watching form a ring far wider than is natural. Even birds obey some physics when physics is a personality rather than an equation. Teach leans on the prow and drinks the room with his eyes without entering it. I see you, he calls, as if across a small river rather than 100 meters of water that hates what the Emperor is. You are the kind who decided to save everyone. You got tired. I like tired men. They're honest. Your honesty is theft that learned grammar, the Emperor answers. He steps back out, the rails humming under his boots. Vegapunk pivots to the satellites. Harmonic nodes ready, Shaka says. Rail density adjustable. Edison flutters with cables, hands jittering. I can spike a decoy signature. Make him think there are two of you. Atlas grins with too many teeth for a lab assistant. And if he bites, I'll punch the air where he thought you were. Captain, the Emperor tells the Marine officer. Cut anchors. The man nods, relief shading his posture. Obedience to a swing is sometimes bravery, hiding from itself. He faces Teach, who oozes darkness like oil runs from a broken pipeline that thinks it has become a river. Leave, the Emperor says again, not weary, but absolute. Or be contained. Teach spreads fingers. Darkness spills like ink dropped on a law book. Contain this. The rails under the Emperor's feet quiver where the anti-field licks at them. Shaka throttles power, adjusts phase, grows quiet as a priest mixing incense. The disc holds. The sea tries a trick, spray where darkness isn't, and he tunes the field to ignore every droplet pretending to be a ship. He answers darkness with geometry. He writes a wedge of negative gradient to split the yummy flux into two trains that waste one another. He writes a lattice that persuades nothing to be at home anywhere. He writes, and the whole snarls. Teach laughs and pulls. The Emperor feels a tug that is not physical but definitional. The golden edge of his will, law-binding, oath-writing. Phrase, threads unspooling into the black like silk into a drain. He tightens the weave, not with more power, but with more clarity. The law he binds is not his. It is the civilian's right to not be killed for someone else's opinion of justice. The pull pauses, considers, then yanks harder. 4 to 6 sentences of how the whole hurts him leaven his throat. He releases them as doctrine for his allies. Darkness is an informational sink. It creates local singularities where cause refuses to talk to effect, and non-local constructs, warp thought, predictive mesh, oath fields, lose the conversation entirely. His power relies on writing constraints into reality. Yummy writes exemptions and then eats the ink. Sea Prism Stone is the ocean's vote made solid. Yummy Yummy is the ocean's veto wrapped in appetite. Where sea stone pricks and pins, this fruit swallows and drags. He must not give it continuous contact or stable definitions to digest. Kizaru tests again. A beam at a wide angle, multi-source to spread redundancy. He watches as each thread slides into the dark and dies, not because it is weaker, but because the equation it thought it lived in has been rewritten. Well, he says softly. He is not polite. Containment, the Emperor repeats. He moves. The rails syncopate, a music system learning a new time signature. He drags darkness sideways with a false vulnerability. A decoy oath that invites appetite. Teach lunges. Atlas slams a harmonic. The whole slips. Not much. Enough. The Emperor does not attack. He curates. He persuades the black to bite air and then feeds it empty patterns until it is briefly sated on nothing. He throws his sword, not as a spear, but as a ruler laid across a crooked line. It pins a slice of darkness between two definitions and forces it to choose. It hates choosing. It flares, stutters, and contracts like a scream turned into a cough. Teacher's grin snags. What are you? He asks. Not afraid, but investing curiosity in a future tactic. Accountant, the Emperor says, and the sword sings back to his hand as if strings are impatient. Power bleeds from him faster than in any engagement here yet, because every correction the whole eats must be reauthored. He is careful, uses fewer letters, shorter sentences. Being eloquent costs too much in this grammar. He moves the fight laterally, away from the lab's core, rails knitting ahead, rails peeling behind. Marines line the railings of their ships and do not shoot, not because an order stayed their hands, but because they have seen enough times when shooting was a reflex that did not produce justice. Some pray, some swear, some write quiet letters in their heads to people they will never meet again. The elder walks the causeway toward the lab, not watching the fight. He studies men. He tests doors with his presence and finds which ones open and which ones lock. He finds Vegapunk, marks him as treacherous and necessary, and writes both words over his picture in a private file. He finds the Marine captain and writes useful, noisy. He finds Kizaru and writes nothing, because Kizaru writes his own notes and leaves them lying around like traps. That's 17 Sisson. Teach opens his palm, and a fan of darkness becomes bullets made of nub. They streak, not quite straight, eating air to get traction. The Emperor does not deflect them. He refuses to agree that they are bullets. The rails answer. The air forgets that lines were promised. The holes arrive as smudges instead of wounds and slide into the sea, which thanks them by taking them home. Behind the black, a sniper appears and vanishes, teleporting with the coy smugness of a man who arrived before he left. The Emperor adjusts parallax and writes a note in the map. Van Augur, termite of distance. He draws 3 invisible planes at odd angles to catch ricochets that haven't been born yet. A shot that would have licked Vegapunk's ear kisses a plane instead, and thinks about career change. Shiryu shimmers into reality near the rails, blade already cutting. He is fast, invisible when mist is convenient, visible when pride is. The Emperor hears the mist inhale and knows the cut by the taste of the air, arrogance with a scar under it. He catches the stroke on the guard, the gold singing a note like a bell rung underwater. Sword, Shiryu says interested. Not many men bring law to a knife fight. Many men are dead for that line, the Emperor replies, and forces Shiryu to step into a rail that chooses to be more solid for him than it was an instant before. Shiryu grunts, circles, and vanishes again into a fog that is not weather. The first victory flowers in this. Civilians are gone. The lab still stands. The Buster Call has become a witness instead of an executioner. He anchors the wind carefully, tacks it with small axe, catching a broken beam that would have crushed an intern who refused to leave his station, quieting a generator that wanted to tantrum into explosion. He refuses to allow Teach to convert this into a piracy of meaning. They gather again in the war room in a 3-minute inhale while Teach repositions. The Emperor leans on nothing and keeps himself exactly still, because stillness is a weapon and also because moving is more expensive right now than it should be. Your victory looks like retreat to the untrained, the Marine captain says. Not critical. You traded ground for tempo. I traded vanity for options, the Emperor says. A war would feed him. A field makes him chew until he is bored. He looks at Kizaru. You're light. It can carry instruction in its frequency. Kizaru blinks. Orders by photons. He smiles, actually smiles, as if a lazy cat has decided to pounce because the math is elegant. A broadcast that darkness cannot eat because it's nothing but a change in the idea of color. Teach is conceptual, Vegapunk murmurs. He steals definition. We must act where definitions are held tighter. Inside minds, trained to resist theft. He looks at the Marine captain. Haki. The room nods on a single hinge. The Emperor inclines his head. Teach's hunger chews my law because it's written in the air. If it is written in the heart, your Haki, it will hold longer. I will need to learn your grammar fast enough to write a small sentence. Atlas snorts again. He wants to learn Haki over lunch. Over lunch, the Emperor agrees, not smiling. And over pain. The Marine captain squares his shoulders. I can't teach you the heart, he says, but I can tell you what it feels like when it stands. It's not a shout. It's when you decide that you are the measure of your own promise. He feels foolish, then does not, because the Emperor listens like a man listening to a surgeon. Kizaru rolls a photon between fingers. I'll paint a grid in the sky, he says. Not light. The idea of a left and right sharpened. If Teach eats color, he still has to pick a direction. Make him pick enough, and he'll get tired of choosing. Doctor, the Emperor says, prepare a reversible C-prism lattice at the rail's edges. Vegapunk flinches. It hurts you. It will hurt him more, the Emperor says. We will touch null to null and make him argue with himself. Mercy, the Marine captain says, as if testing whether the word has changed shape in the last 10 minutes. Can you keep it when he starts throwing crewmen at you like rocks? The Emperor holds his gaze. Yes. He doesn't explain how. He will bear shame before he kills a lovesick boy forced into a life by hunger, or a woman whose village owed a debt to a noble and found piracy cheaper than taxes. He will choose where the killing happens and make it small. He has no patience for the pose of purity. Then we will be your sword, the captain says, surprising himself. And your shield, Vegapunk adds, surprising no one. They step out again. Kizaru laces the sky with an instructional net, light writing a faint tessellation that looks like the underside of a giant leaf. Teach frowns as if the air had just developed a personality. Darkness washes up, pauses, and is forced to choose between left and right 100 times per second. The Emperor feels the tug weaken by a sliver. He plunges the rail's ends into a seam of reversible sea-stone lattice. Thin filaments threaded with switches, each filament a syllable of pain. The lattice bites him. He does not flinch. He stares at Teach and invites. Teach takes the invitation because appetite is vanity that can talk. He pulls. Sea-stone stings him back through his own darkness. He shakes his hand as if he had grabbed a fence that didn't want to be owned. Zehaha, dirty trick. Doctrine, the Emperor says. And for a heartbeat, his law feels like it might hold its breath forever. Van Auger's shot bends around a curve Kizaru drew subtly into the air. It arrives late and abashed. Shiryu's blade kisses a rail and decides not to sing, because the rail eats the note. Lafitte, charming and thin, steps where gravity is supposed to be and finds that Kizaru persuaded it to be somewhere else for a millisecond, which is enough to make his ankle doubt his loyalties. Teach snarls and does something new. He compresses his darkness into a singularity with edges, a black star no god should permit. He throws it like a stone at the lab. The Emperor is already there. Prediction is logistics. He meets the singularity with the flat of his palm and the edge of his oath. The impact is a memory of tectonic plates arguing. The singularity trembles, then unfolds into a bruise that the sky sighs out over 10 minutes. It costs him. Blood beads at his wrist where salt crept under a seal and argued successfully to be allowed inside. He breathes through the pain and issues a new law. No droplets on his flesh. The sea finds the claws and obeys petulantly. Zehaha. Teach laughs again, because laughter is cheaper than letting fear talk. You're fun. You are a child playing with a black hole, the Emperor says. Put it down. Teach sets his feet. Make me. The Emperor goes forward. Not a charge, charges of a theatre. A forward line that obligates space to be a friend. His sword writes 3 short sentences into the dark. Thou shalt not drag. Thou shalt not expand. Thou shalt not lie about edges. Darkness buckles as if tripping over a truth it didn't know existed. He fills the buckling with rails and pain and a gloved hand that will not permit a city to be stolen. Kizaru hums, adjusts the grid, and suddenly Teach finds that every step down is up and every step up is sideways. He curses and laughs at once, the sound a jammed door rattling. Van Auger's frustrated shot takes a nap in a pocket of air that forgot time. The elder watches all this and measures the Emperor's limits with a tailor's cool interest. He is bound by cost, he murmurs, not to anyone. But the heir enjoys being informed. Good. Vegapunk calls from the gantry, voice hitched with a guilt he refuses. I can amplify the lattice, but you will. Do it, the Emperor says. Pain pours up the rails and into his bones. His law falters, then tightens, then shines across its own injury the way scar tissue knows the shape of old movement and imitates it with stubborn craft. He grows smaller for 1 second, a man instead of an answer, and then larger again, answer and question both. Teach takes a step and finds his foot in a ring of sea stone filaments that are not really there but hurt anyway. He snarls, rips his foot free, and throws a fist of darkness at the filaments. The filaments do not move. They were never in space. They were written into the room's notion of step. Freedom, Teach says, almost heuristic, means I decide what a step is. Freedom, the Emperor replies, means you don't decide that for everyone else. The black hole man pulls. The golden law man holds. The sea votes against both of them and tries to elect itself king. Kizaru stuffs ballots of left and right into the box until fraud becomes fairness. Vegapunk abides by a principle older than any throne. Keep the lights on. Keep the kids alive. Keep the books honest even when the numbers scream. Minutes pass like years burned in a tight flame. The fight migrates another 100 meters away. The lab remains. The first victory, now tested by piracy, still breathes. They break again for 60 seconds because men must drink. The Emperor drinks air and thought, nothing more. He cannot risk water. Vegapunk presses a towel into his gauntlet, because you offer a king what you can. The Marine captain watches the elder's posture and predicts the next hour's politics with the jaundiced accuracy of a man who knows what it costs to be disciplined after being brave. Your mercy is holding, the captain says. Our survival looks less like a coin toss and more like a ledger where the numbers can be negotiated. Good, the Emperor says. Kizaru tilts his head. Light carries instruction. Darkness carries story. We need to decide which story wins the hearts watching. He gestures to the fleet, to the snails, to the world that will hear about this as gossip before it hears it as doctrine. Then tell them this, the Emperor says, projecting his voice into the net of light, letting it ride on a frequency the darkness cannot metabolize. Justice is not spectacle. It is restraint. We will not burn a city to light a warning. Teach hears it and howls laughter. Say haha, then I'll light it for you. He wrenches darkness into a tide and slaps it at the lab, a childish strike full of genius violence. The tide hits the lattice and breaks, not into spray, but into possibilities too small for hunger. The lab windows quake, glass tastes the future and doesn't like it, then returns to the present with a shiver. A child inside drops a beaker and refuses to cry because heroes are nearby. The Emperor plants his feet, both discs humming with rude pain, his field tight and almost ascetic now. No ornament, no flourish, only function. He thinks of the 3 ways he has chosen and badged and abandoned across 10,000 years. Emperor, father, machine. He chooses a 4th quiet thing, neighbor. He addresses Teach one more time. Leave. Teach bares teeth. Make me, he repeats, but there's the slightest burr in the bravado now. A pebble in a shoe he cannot remove with a joke. The elder claps his hands once, a small sound, and turns his head slightly toward the Admiral. The gesture carries 3 orders and 2 threats. Kizaru's gaze slides to the elder, then back to the Emperor, then to Teach. He sighs, like a man choosing to get out of a warm bath. I'm changing sides, he says to no one, and to everyone, and to the snail that will record this cowardice or courage as policy. For 1 hour only, against the pirate. He does not say why. Maybe he wants to see what the light does when it believes in someone who isn't a chair. The elder's silence is not assent. It is a memo to the future. Kizaru steps onto the rail lattice, photons adjusting to this grammar with feline disdain. He lifts both hands and writes a chorus line across the sky. The grid sharpens. Directions no longer wobble near darkness. They insist on themselves. Van Augur misses for the first time in a year and looks at his rifle like it has betrayed him. Let us, Kizaru murmurs. Be inconvenient. Teach roars, stamps, throws a black star with both hands, and the Emperor meets it with a palm and a promise. It breaks less easily now. He is learning. The whole learns back fast. They trade definition and appetite across a surface written on rails and pain and stubborn men making choices. War council adjourned, the Emperor says, not leaving the field. New agenda. Drive the thief to sea. Keep the lab intact. Teach the fleet a story worth repeating. The Marine captain salutes a man who has no rank in his doctrine. Aye. He turns to his crew. Tethers loose. Engines back gentle. Keep the line. If you see a civilian, break the line for him. He will be punished. He will do it anyway. He has found a mirror he can look into tomorrow. The elder watches the ledger tip. He calculates how to make this cost his enemies more than it cost him. He watches Kizaru and writes a slow letter to a certain room where chairs float and eyes perhaps glow. He watches the Emperor and writes nothing, because some enemies are best understood in silence. Teach breathes hard and smiles anyway. Zehaha. All right, shiny king. You can write. Let's see if you can erase. He balls the darkness and throws it at the horizon, to call someone or something that answers only to boldness and debt. The sea heaves. A new tremor rolls in the water's will. The Emperor feels it like a nail tapping on a coffin lid from the inside. Another threat, not just teeth, but poison. He adjusts a plan he did not admit to having. He tasted corruption once in a warp storm and did not bow. He will not bow to its cousin wearing nautical clothes. He turns his head a degree toward Vegapunk's gantry. Prepare medici for conceptual wounds, he says. Not bleeding, blanks. Men will come in wrong. Vegapunk nods, as a surgeon who has worked in bad light nods when handed a candle. The first victory stands. The ideology clash spills through every rail, every order, every held shot and permitted shot. Mercy remains a cost center, not a lost leader. Survival learns a new ledger. Darkness curves in the air and makes a question mark above the island. The Emperor answers with a period. No. The tremor comes thin as a violin string, then fattens into a rope that tugs the island's keel. The sea shutters its light. Gulls wheel and leave. He feels the question before the answer. Teach is not only eating light and law, he is dialing something older, a poison disguised as permission. He pulls the room back together with a look. Briefing, he says. Faux goals. Standard counters fail for what reasons? Vegapunk sets the model alive again. Darkness beads in the projection like oil in a clear jar, unable to mix with the water, but happy to smother it. He wants me, the doctor says. And the brain trust still on the island. He will also harvest this. He points to the rail lattice. Because thieves love infrastructure. Publicly, he wants the world government humiliated. Privately, he wants to test the edge of his fruit against something it can't immediately digest. The Marine captain breathes through his teeth. Standard counters fail because he refuses to fight on our verbs. Cannon, beam, blade. He eats lines, crushes surface. He uglies the battlefield until courage looks like bad taste. Kizaru flicks a glance at the elder walking the causeway, then pretends he didn't. I can tie down his choices, but I can't keep him from cheating. He pulls definitions like a rug. The Emperor nods. Then this is the plan. Light writes constraint. Rails write passage. Haki writes refusal. We will lay a refusal inside constraint and send his hunger to chase decoys until he is bored or injured enough to leave. Your law won't hold if he gets a hand on you, the captain says, voice even. He drags men into his center. He won't, the Emperor says. If he does, you will cut me free. If you cannot, you will cut him. He says it like a surgeon signing a consent form. The room accepts the signature, or pretends to. They file back into the air that hates mistakes. Teach hurls the next question first. A smear of black that drips gravity and stretches the sky. The Emperor meets it with a triangle, then a net, then nothing at all. Nothing works best for 3 seconds. Then the whole remembers that emptiness is a pantry and goes looking for food. Kizaru laces direction tighter. Mariners on the railings feel nausea in their bones as up, down, left, right settle into insistence. Van Auger's bullet bends into a parable and goes home to the sea, ashamed. Shiryu tests the rails again. Blade whispering confidence. Mist hiding impatience. The gold guard takes his cut and returns interest in the form of friction he did not order. He disappears, reappears, finds that visibility is a tax he can't evade today, and scowls like a storm denied shore leave. Teach decides he is bored. He throws himself across the rails, darkness in his wake like a cape. The Emperor meets him on a disc stacked on 3 harmonics and a dozen denials. When their hands touch, the world buckles like bad scaffolding. Up close, Teach smells like rum, gun smoke, and the first lie a boy told without getting caught. He grins, showing teeth like poor cliffs. Zehaha, you're big, shiny, and tired. I love you already. You mistake weight for weariness, the Emperor says, and love for appetite. Teach reaches as if for a handshake, and the darkness jumps with him. It wraps the Emperor's wrist, not like rope, but like a muscle remembering a motion it likes. It pulls, law cinches, pain blooms. The Emperor moves his elbow 0.5 millimeter, and the bull misses his spine and gets his shoulder instead. He lets Teach drag him 2 steps, because 2 steps buys space for the rails to reweave. The sea snickers and bites his calves. The sea stone filaments sing like bees in his bones. He files the pain and turns his head a fraction. Let go. Teach squeezes. No. The duel tightens until there is nothing between them but intent. Darkness tugs law into threads. Law ties darkness into clumsy knots. The rail under them buckles, rights itself, buckles again. Kizaru pretends he isn't tempted to shoot both and start over. Come here, Teach snarls, and the gravity in the snarl obliges. The Emperor chooses not to oblige. He writes a second elbow where his first should be, a construct of geometry and oath, and moves along that instead. Teach's pull catches nothing, and yanks his own balance out from under him. Teach laughs and throws with his other hand. The air fractures. The sound is not thunder, it's a spine cracking. A white shockwave blooms, thick as glass, and slaps the world. The Emperor's discs jump. Men across the fleet fall to knees. The lab's windows remember the quake and tell each other to be brave. The sea rides the tremor and tries to pretend it owns it. Gura Gura, Vegapunk's mind labels, cold and academic even, as his heart tries to hammer out of his chest. The quake doesn't hit the Emperor's shield, it hits his assumptions. His constraints depend on continuity. Edges staying where he left them, surfaces not teleporting. The quake moves the edges all at once. His oath slips and catches and slips again. He tries to ride the wave and discovers that waves here are people. They shiver and refuse and talk back. Seastone hum bites the hinge of his shoulder where Yami dragged earlier. The wound channel opens. A null slick bruise under the skin of his field. A hole in the mathematics where denial should be. Darkness sees it and lunges for it like a smoker seeing a lighter in a glove box. He takes the hit. He takes it into the meat of his arm instead of the hinge of his spine. Bones creak. Impressed by etiquette, they do not break. Gold dims. Pain spills like ink and refuses to be blotted. He answers with a cut that is more instruction than injury. Scoring Teach's darkness with do not pass signs at micrometer intervals. Teach barks a laugh that acknowledges tuition paid. He catches the gold guard with his knuckles and yanks. For an instant, the world is a throat. The Emperor uses the throat swallow to slide out of the grip and finds himself a step deeper in the sea spray than he intended. The spray fingerprints his cheek. It burns cold. His prediction horizon dims by a meter. He plants a foot, drags a new disc from a quiet, tired place inside himself, and pushes darkness back with a palm. Enough. Teach feigns agreement and hammers another quake into the joint between rail and air. The shock travels into the lattice that ties his law to this world's weather. The lattice groans. A thread snaps. His left field collapses for a heartbeat and lets 3 bullets through that should not have survived the net. He stops one with the back of his gauntlet and eats the other 2 with his own chest. They punch in and stick. Armor alarm sound. They are old music to him. He lowers his eyes once in respect, then shuts the pain down to a dull note and files it next to the sea's teeth. Teach's grin shifts into something like joy. Now it's a fight. He gives the pirate a fight, not for joy, but to correct the ledger. His sword writes in short strokes, no flourish, no sermon. The gold hums, the edge does not. It eats darkness where it can, refuses to argue where it can't. He uses rails like stepping stones in a river that wants him drowned. Teach fights like a catastrophe with a sense of humor. He drags, he cracks, he laughs, he cheats, and the world applauds the audacity because men who have been hungry love a thief who stole from a rich man once. The elder does not applaud. He watches how deep the Yami bruise eats into the Emperor's field and writes a policy. Increase seastone exposure on contact. Leverage ocean as ally. Punish mercy as optics allow. Kizaru flickers into a line that wants to be a spear. Light takes the Emperor's cue and writes constraint instead of critique. He stitches a seam across the black and gives the Emperor a handle. The handle holds for a count of 5, then melts into appetite and slips. 5 counts are enough. The Emperor steps in and cuts the darkness around Teach's wrists into tatters. He doesn't touch flesh, he touches habit. The tatters fall, and Teach blinks because his grab doesn't bite like it used to. Teach answers with a quake through the floor of the world instead of its skin. The field stutters. The wound in the Emperor's shoulder widens along a channel the dark already mapped. His fingers numb. The gold on his gauntlet cracks like old lacquer. Pain is a proposition. He accepts it and writes over it. Not today. He steps through the numb and changes grip. He shortens the sword, reweights his stance. Fights like a man who has been taught by pain to use his left hand more than he wanted to. He lets Teach pull him into a clinch. At 0 distance, Yami eats everything except honesty. He gives honesty, a headbutt that lives in the logic of skulls and is older than philosophy. Teach's nose crunches. The pirate who thought he was fighting a god sees a man and is delighted to find that this makes the god more dangerous, not less. The sea judges both and withholds its endorsement. He feels the next quake coming in the way a house feels a train. He can't stop it, he can steer it. He braces rails to take the flex and rakes law across the shock to comb its teeth out. It still smashes him in the chest and knocks him 3 discs back. He slides, kneels, rises. Teach raises both fists, giddy. Zehahaha. The Emperor breathes once. No. They collide. Darkness sings, gold groans, rails scream. The world's plague of spectatorship goes quiet in every skull that hasn't been knocked silly. Seagulls stop betting and simply watch. Teach takes a handful of cape-thick dark and tries to drown the sword. The Emperor moves the blade sideways into a syllable that refuses baptism. The dark hesitates, confused by a refusal that didn't raise its voice. He uses the pause, takes the wrist, rolls the elbow, and applies a law he knows from 10,000 knife fights in alleys where empires are measured in meals. The wrist pops. Teach grunts, then laughs again because pain means good company. He slings the other hand, and the quake kisses the Emperor's ribs with vicious affection. Bones flex, sigh, and do not give. He chooses a promise, puts it in his throat and speaks it to the pirate's face. Leave this island. Teach tries to say make me, but the word sits stupid in his mouth because for a second, there is too much gravity on his tongue. The Emperor didn't crush him. He crushed the syllable. Teach spits, and the syllable falls out and swims away in the dark with a fish's tail. Marines cheer without sound. The cheer trapped behind their teeth by protocol and fear. CP0 re-evaluate assassination lines and find none that look like career advancement. Vegapunk writes on a tablet with a stylus that shakes. He draws rails he never thought he would build because he was too polite to the sea. Teacher stumbles back 2 steps and grins like a concession speech that doubles as a threat. Zehaha, you bleed, you breathe. You're mine and theirs. Good. I love a triangle. He throws his hands wide. The dark bulks and swallows a sea lane, then spits it out sideways at a marine ship. The Emperor turns his blade, rights a hinge at the lane's midpoint, and folds the attack until it flops into the water like a rug, too tired to be dangerous. He does it without looking at the men aboard. He does it because mercy does not look at the audience. Teach goes low. The next drag is not for the Emperor's body. It is for his thought. Yami sucks at the edges of his prediction, pulling the threads of tomorrow farther away. The field trembles. The horizon in his head recedes like a friend stepping backward into smoke. He fights now as much by memory as by math. It is enough. It is not enough. He needs a different verb. Teach senses this and offers one. Come with me, he says, breath warm with rum and heat and the freedom of men who don't pay taxes because they burn the taxman's office. We'll split it, the world, the sky. You hate chairs, I hate chairs. We'll make a ship big enough to be a chair that moves. The temptation is not a cartoon. It knows his wound. It does not say take, it says rest. He imagines a deck instead of a throne, a horizon instead of a ledger, a laugh instead of a prayer. He imagines a gentle, honest theft from his own obligations. The sea slaps his ankle for being sentimental. He snorts very softly, mostly at himself. No. Teach shrugs like a man refusing investment advice. Then die for someone else's chair, he says. Zahaha. The elder waits for his own turn to tempt and chooses a different flavor. He stands on the causeway and permits his voice to carry like weather. You can be sanctioned, he says, reasonable as a banker. Justice with a badge. We will set rules. You will be obeyed. You will not bleed alone. He looks at Vegapunk, at the Marine captain, at Kizaru, and promises them the mercy of not having to decide without permission. You will retain your machine, he adds, the way a man adds a clause about a summer house to a will. The Emperor does not look at him. You will set my mercy on a leash, he answers. You will name it order and call me useful. I will kill myself slower. Teach slams the quake into his back and sends him forward 2 steps, because the sea loves men who face away from power when they answer it. He rolls with the hit and comes up without a flourish. Refusal has a price. He pays it and keeps the receipt. Shiryu appears behind Vegapunk in the midst of stress. Blade a silver parenthesis intending to close around a neck full of ideas. The Emperor measures 3 choices and takes one that risks shame over blood. He throws his sword. It doesn't sing. It goes where it must and knocks the blade aside. It catches Shiryu's ego, dents it, and returns. Kizaru is there a half instant later. Light translating into a kick that suggests the swordsman take a day off. Shiryu slides backward, pride sparking like flint. The sacred sign arrives not to save, but to stare. A shape rises out of the water, too big for scale, too patient for anger. A sea king's eye crowns the rail line like a new planet. It looks at the Emperor for 1 long pulse and a second longer. Its gaze is not soft. It carries a syllable older than the world government and just as intolerant of blasphemy. He hears it without ears, not prophecy, an inventory, oaths broken, oaths kept, oaths rewritten. He feels a drumbeat under the island that is not war, that is joy trying to remember itself in a century taught to be quiet. He tastes a word that this world wants to be when it grows up. Laughter, stretched until it makes a sun. The Sea King breathes. The breath is a tide. The tide drenches him. The pain is theological. His law flickers. He steadies it because you do not drop your end of a bridge when someone else is still on it. The Sea King sinks again with no message, because the sea does not leave memos. It leaves bodies. Its presence was a warning, not a rescue. Teach sees it and grins wider. The elder sees it and frowns into his sleeve, then pretends he didn't. The duel returns to human scale because it must. Even gods prefer manageable paperwork. Teach tries to pull him into the black again and finds his hand full of legal language. The Emperor writes injunctions into the yummy flow that look like modest pillars and behave like hard manners. The dark stumbles over them and makes a sound like a drunk apologizing. He closes and cuts. Not Teach, but the space Teach uses. Lines vanish. Corners refuse to be sharp. The pirate tries to step with swagger and finds his footwork making apologies. He hates apologies. He throws a quake in a childish arc, and the Emperor slaps it down with the back of his hand like scolding a pot. Then darkness learns a new trick. It burrows. It doesn't pull at surfaces. It tunnels through inference. It eats the assumptions under his discs and leaves them floating with nothing to be above. He drops 6 inches. He hates the feeling more than falling. It finds the wound in his shoulder and kisses it with vacuum. The kiss is ugly. He grimaces, allows it to hurt, then welds the edges with a thought that tastes like soda and regret. Teach leans in. This is the part where kings break and make themselves liars. The Emperor does not answer him. He answers the men on the rails. Hold, he says through Kizaru's net. If you cannot hold, bend. If you cannot bend, live. I will pay the rest. He forces the fight sideways again, away from the lab, away from the causeway, into uglier water where he spends pain he can afford and saves pain he cannot. He takes a cut through his waste field to protect a Marine who would never know it was done for him and whose daughter will someday be bored at dinner and never learn why. Teach sees civilians are gone and decides the stage is too empty. He jams his thumb into the dark and drags out a shape like a comet, throws it at the nearest ship, and waits to see if the Emperor will choose optics or order. The Emperor plants his feet and chooses both. He convinces the comet that it is already done exploding and guides the pieces into the sea. The sea thanks him with more pain than gratitude. Mercy is a poor negotiator. Survival is cheap. The ledger trembles and tries to be art. He sees the hole's rhythm finally, the way a boxer sees the opponent's left shoulder twitch before the right hook. Yami pulls on the offbeat. Gura hammers on the beat. He steps through the offbeat. He meets the beat on the half. He cuts short, hard, no sermons. He says stop without lips. He says leave with his eyes. He reaches for Teach's hand and writes into it. Open. It opens. Teach swears with admiration because admiration is how he hides fear from himself. He slams a quake down his own arm and into the Emperor's palm. The gold cracks again. The bones beneath are stung but keen on proving their union lasting. The next drag snags something deeper than geometry. It tugs on obligation. His thoughts slide, only a hair, toward wanting this to be done. The tug is small. It is enough to worry him. He clamps down on himself with the same gentleness he uses to stop a bridge from shivering apart when a column fails. Vegapunk watches the duel as a test stand and sees something he hates. His rails flex on a frequency he cannot measure with instruments. He feels it behind his eyes instead. It is belief. It is being tested. He calls to the Emperor without words, a scientist praying with a graph. The Emperor hears and nods, a soldier answering a peer, not a supplicant. Teach overcommits, just a hair, and the Emperor takes what he gives. He spins him, hands gentle, elbows violent, and throws him into a presentation of sea-stone lattice that says, learn. Teach learns. He yells like a cat trapped in a well. He drags the pain around himself like a coat and uses it as defense. It works because he decides it works. The Emperor files the tactic. He respects audacity even when it is ugly. They break. They circle. The Sea King does not return. Kizaru writes a note in light across the sky. We are watching. The elder sighs in a way only men with a monopoly on sighs know how to, and stirs the air with his displeasure. The duel's end comes not from a clean blow, but from arithmetic. The Emperor sees his law thinning. The Yami bruise spreading in slow inches. The sea-stone pain becoming a baseline he cannot ignore. He could end this by breaking Teach's neck. He could do it through 3 rails and a half thought. He does not, because 1,000 boys watch and think about the shape of justice. He opts for an uglier truth. He lets the pirate go to save the lab and the men who would die in the spectacle of victory. He pushes the fight outward with a last palmed injunction and a plank of Kizaru's constraint. Teach slides, then launches, then laughs because leaving by choice looks like winning in the papers. Zehaha, he calls, holding his bleeding nose and his cracked pride together with swagger. I'll come back when you're more fun. Keep that brain warm for me, shiny king. His ship turns like a thief deciding which alley is best for the next crime. Van Auger snatches a last shot, misses on purpose to make a point about control. Shiryu glares with professional interest at the Emperor's sword and files a resentment for later. The Marine captain does not order pursuit. He is not stupid. The Elder does not permit pursuit. He is not patient. He calculates the narrative. The government arrived. A pirate arrived. A stranger stole the stage. The government will subtract the stranger and add itself to the story later. Third, the Emperor stands on a disc that shivers like a lip, sword low, chest rising too evenly. He keeps his breathing even because panic can leak through nets like water. Vegapunk comes to the rail and looks at the blood on the Emperor's gauntlet, as if it were his fault for not inventing something kinder. You are injured, he says, redundant, useful. I am accounted, the Emperor replies. He opens the gauntlet and spills the bullets into Vegapunk's hand. They are small. They weigh everything. Codex note. The Yamigura interface creates a compound wound. Null-induced definitional collapse followed by macroscale shear, forcing oath constructs to operate at reduced coherence and leak prediction through the breach. The temptation arrives again at a different angle. The Elder lifts his hand, fingers spread as if to show he holds no knife. Under sanction, you will have corridors, he says. You will have permissions. You will not be forced to choose between optics and order. We will give you jurisdiction. He does not add, we will tax you. He does not add, we will own your story. He doesn't need to. The Emperor looks past him at the children packed in the last lifter, their faces pressed to the glass of a future they may or may not qualify for. He thinks of a chair made of wires and prayers a galaxy away. He thinks of his hand, which is a continent with a road across it called duty. No, he says again, and the syllable costs more this time because saying no to an easier war is work. The price comes due in small coins. His arm trembles twice when he lowers the sword. He hides it because little boys watch. His prediction horizon comes back grudgingly, like a dog insulted by a previous master. He lets it sulk and decides anyway. The sacred sign returns in a different key. Beneath the lab, the oldest stones think out loud. A hum rises through the rails, then through the soles of the feet, then through the teeth. Those who can hear the voice of all things. 2 interns, a marine bosun, a little girl who thinks physics is just charming, blink and cry without understanding why. He hears not language, but obligation rendered as music. Joy promised, joy broken, joy deferred. An invitation not to mirth, but to repair. It does not point at a man. It points at a room. It points uphill to a throne that is empty because someone sits in it and insists emptiness is a policy. He turns to Vegapunk. There is a hidden thesis under this island. It hums. It will not be protected by fighting pirates forever. Vegapunk nods. Tears he hates burning his eyes red. There is, he says, and it's bigger than me. The Marine captain hears the hum and thinks about the first time his daughter asked him why the flag was red, and he said, because sometimes it needs to be seen. He looks at the Elder and realizes he is looking at red, without being told why. He doesn't enjoy this revelation. The Elder sees the hum as a ledger entry. He writes a command to himself. Accelerate the event, pull the lever, remove the singer, keep the song, claim the melody as policy. He does not say it aloud. He does not need to. The Emperor holsters mercy and pulls purpose. We are done here, he tells the air. Your evacuation holds. Your lab breathes. Your pirates are bored. Next, judgment. Whose? The Marine captain asks, already knowing. The throne's, the Emperor says. He does not say the name. Names in this room have too much power and too little honesty. Kizaru scratches his cheek with a light he doesn't mean to show. You going uphill? He asks, mild as tea cooling. I will walk where law pretends to be origin, the Emperor says, and find out whose appetite is fed with its rhetoric. You'll be erased, the captain says, because his duty requires pessimism to be aired like laundry, or it moulders. Not today, the Emperor answers. He turns his head toward the elder at last. Summon me, call it a hearing, dress it in pageantry, or I will walk uninvited, and pageantry will be put on trial instead. The elder considers the optics. He can present this as confidence, not concession. He can hold court and imply ownership of the man he intends to dissect. He can frame the story. Present yourself at Pangaea Castle, he says, the words like rocks falling into a well. You will be judged. If you refuse, the seas will swallow this island and any similar pretensions. The Marine captain flinches. Vegapunk's jaw squares like a brace being tightened on a broken mast. Kizaru looks at the sun and checks what time it is somewhere else he might prefer to be. The Emperor accepts the wardrobe of ritual because he can use it as a map. I will come, he says. Not to kneel, to audit. He turns and the rails thicken into an avenue. The lab stiffens into a cathedral and then shakes it off, embarrassed. Vegapunk touches his arm again, then pulls his hand back before the sea can punish him by proxy. Your wound, he says, urgent as a friend who won't watch you go to war without packing your lunch. The channel, it will eat. It will widen in null fields. We can overlay a sea stone counter, but it will hurt, the Emperor finishes. Pain is information. We will read it. Let me come, Vegapunk says. Ridiculous, brave. You will live, the Emperor says, kind, absolute. And make sure the island does too. The Marine captain clears his throat. I'll escort you to the edge of my career, he says, with gallows humor that feels almost like joy. Then I'll come home and see about survival. Kizaru looks at the elder. The elder's gaze is a barometer with no pressure. Kizaru sighs and decides to play courier between a sun and an empty seat. I'll draw the path, he says, and sketches a difficult route with photons that form steps up through the sky like a staircase in a story that expects a hero to trip and refuses to help him when he doesn't. The Emperor takes one last look at the sea. It looks back, unmoved. He bows to it a very small distance, not deferential, respectful. It acknowledges the bow with a slap on his ankle that will make walking uphill more expensive. Pilgrimages are priced to encourage sincerity, he mutters. Old humor so dry it is almost a prayer. He starts up. Behind him, men get back to work. Vegapunk rips up a floor and finds an old song written in stone and starts humming it, because humming is sometimes the only rebellion a scientist can afford. The Marine captain pretends to file a report and writes a resignation letter he won't send, because duty is sometimes dignified by proximity to a better man. Kizaru rolls his shoulders like a man who has chosen to be late to a meeting he does not respect. Teach sails out far enough to feel safe and then throws bottles into the sea with notes to himself. Buy more pain. Learn Seastone's recipe. Steal a god when you have the hands. The elder walks back to the causeway, thinking about rooms where chairs float and how the word audit can be strangled by secret. The wound talks while he climbs. It speaks in small, unromantic protest. It leaks prediction when he is sloppy. It flares when the sea looks at him with too much interest. It is corruption without theatre. The best kind for systems that love to pretend evil is always operatic. He refuses 100 temptations between steps, to sit, to let the Marine captain take a burden that will break him, to tell Vegapunk a comforting lie, to answer Kizaru's sardonic looks with a sarcasm that will make them friends and weaken both. He keeps his mouth clean and his hands busy. Halfway to the sky, a shadow cuts the light. Not a ship, not a bird. A thing older than jurisdictions, drifting lazy and idiotic, its belly full of teeth and coal. A world government monster floats on a breeze full of permissions and stares at him with the absence of eyes. Its name is a word not fit for snails. It is sacred because people bow when they see it, because they prefer to live. It moans. The moan carries a signature that tastes like papers signed with someone else's hand. It is a warning. The supremacy will not fight you with men only. It has organisms trained on obedience. He does not kill it, because killing would make fishermen elsewhere starve when the government reassigns budgets to vengeance instead of nets. He rewrites its appetite for 10 minutes. It decides it is full, drifts to one side, forgets him. Sacred intervention, not a rescue, a reminder that his path will be assessed by powers that do not read, only eat. He climbs, the sky thins, his field tightens to a nerve. Pain sings on the railings like fingers on a glass. On the last step he pauses and looks back. The island is small, the ships are smaller. Men are ants with banners. The Sea King is nowhere and everywhere. The Elder is a dot with a line of authority around him like a heat haze. Kizaru is a bird that can leave whenever he wants and chooses not to today. Vegapunk is a spark in a jar. The Marine captain is a spine. He looks forward. The path is not a path. It is a thesis. Pageantry, corridors, golden guards. Blanks like the ocean made human. Cathedrals pretending to be courthouses. He will walk through it, as if into a machine that intends to eat him and tell him he volunteered. He adjusts the binding on his shoulder with 2 fingers. He tells the wound it can talk but not decide. He tells himself he may be wrong, and that if he is, he will be wrong bravely, not lazily. The summons arrives formal and late, couriered by a woman whose eyes belong to policy. By command of the 5, she says, meaning more than 5 and less than 1. Present yourself at Pangaea Castle for inquiry, judgment, and correction. Correction, he says, pleasant as winter. I am familiar with the term. He steps off the last rail and onto a moving road, made of light, pretending to be stone. It carries him toward the mountain, whose heart is a chair. He does not look down again. He knows exactly what he carries. He knows exactly who wants to take it from him. He knows exactly which choice hurts now, which choice hurts later, and which choice jerks a generation out of hiding and into daylight with a laugh. He chooses the pain that keeps the laugh possible. Around him, Denden Mushis pretend their eyes are closed and record everything. The Elder pretends his eyes are open and misses a thing he will regret missing later. Kizaru hums a tune that will scandalize a room upstairs. Vegapunk writes a code that will feel like treason and turn out to be citizenship. He climbs, and the world holds its breath because the air is thin, and because it loves a trial that promises blood and gets law instead. The shadow at the top is not a door. It is a mouth. He walks into it with his sword at rest and his mercy awake. He walks toward a room where chairs dream of being gods and men practice the art of not kneeling. He walks toward judgment and intends to improve it. The road of light pretends to be stone. Below it, the red line breathes through ancient pores. He walks at the center of a formation. Kizaru to his right, a CP0 file to his left, 2 seraphim pacing like contrite angels. Behind, a marine flagship holds position, guns sheathed, pennants reading discipline instead of threat. Ahead, The sky thins into the gilded weather that hangs over thrones. Medicae crews meet him halfway, not with stretchers but with ritual. A narrow chapel bay opens on the flagship's spine, bulkheads polished by decades of whispers. He stands beneath a lamp that hums with sea stone ballast, the pain in his shoulder waking like a dog at a doorbell. A surgeon with inked wrists and neat eyes prepares a mesh that glitters like netted rain. "This will bite," she says, honest as a clean blade. It is an overlay tuned to the null. It pins the wound shut where definitions leak. "Do it," he says. He sits because sitting admits that man and machine both require humility to function. The mesh lowers. Sea stone stings through the gold into the bruise carved by Yami and Gorosei. His field contracts, resentful. He lets it. He concentrates on breathing in an even cadence, because cadence rescues more men than heroics. A woman in an old uniform, hair the color of veteran parchment, steps from the shadows with a logbook in her hands. Vice Admiral Suru does not bow. She has shaken the wrinkles out of too many schemes to waste posture on ore. "You bleed correctly," she says, nonchalant, nearly kind. "Is there an incorrect way?" he asks, voice level. "When men make others pay their bill," she replies. She touches the logbook closed with a dry fingertip. "Cost versus dogma. You heard the argument downstairs." He watches the surgeon's careful hands for one long breath. Dogma insists the bill never arrives. Cost insists it always will. We must teach men to pay before interest becomes a war. Suru studies the mesh as it tightens. The elder calls that sedition. She looks up at him. "I call it housekeeping." The corner of her mouth curves 1/8 of an inch. He will dress housekeeping in capital letters before this is over. Kizaru leans against a bulkhead, light pooling in the curve of his shoulder like lazy water. "You and I," he says to Tsuru, "should charge admission. People already pay," Tsuru answers. She gestures with her logbook toward the Emperor. "Some more than others." He tastes iron where his breath cuts past the bruise. The mesh binds tighter, hissing. "Pain reads clearer than speeches," he says. "But speeches buy time for the bandages to work." Tsuru doesn't nod, but she doesn't leave. Dogma says cut the rot, even if the meat goes with it. Koss says cut too much, and men forget how to stand. A pause. The lamp's hum grows patient. "What does your throne say?" "It says, find the vein and stop the bleed without breaking the bone," he answers. "It also says, sit, and I have obeyed too long." Kizaru's mouth curves in its almost smile. "Troublesome chair." The surgeon clips the mesh's ends and recites the small litany Marine Medicae say only when they are truly afraid. "Stay shut, stay clean, stay true." The sea stone aroma clings to the syllables like brine. An alarm chirps. Every den mushi in the bay swivels. The light outside shifts toward red, not attack red, but reception red. The escort path bends toward the Red Line's elevator tower. A rib of the world's spine wrapped in gilded steel, studded with guard balconies, seraphim nests, null towers crackling. On the horizon, dark smokestacks rise from ships that have earned the right to climb without paying toll in fire. They move. The flagship eases into a cradle of light under the tower. Golden guards, holy knights in mirror-polished cuirasses lined with sea stone threads, march in pairs, their steps quiet, expensive. The air inside the tower tastes like obedience distilled and sold in bottles. Nulls arrive like weather, rows of men and women whose presence is the ocean made person, eyes too quiet, breaths that do not fog glass. Their silence punctures his field. It shrinks a polite meter, then another. The mesh bites again, warning and wisdom. He files the sensation as a map of where he will be dumb and where he will remain articulate. The elevator hums. It rises, not smoothly, nothing this old should be, but with a ceremonial wobble that reminds the passenger of old masonry's confidence. Through slotted walls he sees the sea fall away. Then the clouds wheel in, shredded by terraces planted with immaculate lawns no peasant will ever sleep on. Pangaea Castle looms above, less a palace than a cathedral stapled to a courthouse, stapled to a memory. The Marine captain, who defied then, obeyed rides 2 levels below, between a CP0 knot and a Holy Night file. He rolls his shoulders once. He will keep rolling them until he is assigned a desk that refuses spine. Halfway up, the tower's light stutters, not a mechanical failure. A mood swing in the null network. The seraphim stiffen. P0 masks tilt. Zuru glances up, annoyance like a small, tidy storm crossing her face. "He's coming," she says, not loud. Sakazuki arrives with the sound of a cooled rock cracking. The fleet admiral steps into the elevators mid-landing like a verdict. Heat walks in before him, disciplined, punishing. His coat reads justice in a font that admits no adjective. Magma glows under the skin of his forearms as if he bleeds furnace glass. "Escort," he says. The Denden Mushi that watch him draw their mouths into straight lines. Not welcome. Council prefers a direct hand. Kizaru's light goes neutrally opaque. "Sakazuki," he says, neither greeting nor warning. Only the acknowledgement of a natural force with a badge. "Your timing, as ever." Sakazuki's gaze touches Kizaru like a gavel, then slips past to the Emperor. He considers the gold, the bearing, the mesh biting the wound. He stops 1 pace away and does not offer courtesy. "You are outside our law." "I am inside human obligation," the Emperor answers. "This is the only court that matters." Sakazuki steps closer. The nulls breathe almost invisible. The air heats without fire. He lifts his chin a fraction. "Your mercy gets men killed," he says. "Your speeches get children orphaned." His voice is gravel tamped into a straight road. "My justice makes the count smaller. Your justice keeps the ledger neat by not listing bodies you burn to balance it," the Emperor replies, tone still, blade sober. "You optimize, Admiral, by amputating strangers." Tsuru's eyelid twitches. A tiny salute to a debate she has had since cadet days with boys who loved clean answers. "Talk while you move," she tells the elevator's operator. He obeys. The cage glides upward, and the argument climbs with it. A banner lifting toward a wind that promises to tear it. Sakazuki is not patient with conversation. He moves. The elevator cage becomes a crucible for a breath. Magma fists, precise, heavier than law. A gold guard and open palm, lighter than fire, but heavier than a lie. They meet. The cage shudders. The null's presence eats both edges until the clash is man, not myth. High concept. Magma writes a verdict. Gold writes an appeal. The verdict insists. The appeal reframes. Their signatures cross. Heat surges up his arm. The mesh hisses. Sea stone stings back at magma through him. He tastes copper as duty leaks through grit. Sakazuki's face does not change. "You will kneel." The Emperor does not move. "I will stand." He re-weights the platform without shifting his feet. Weight migrates like a disciplined troop redeploying. The elevator sighs, grateful. Sakazuki's eyes flick to Tsuru, then dismiss her. "Dogma keeps the world," he says. "Thrust after thrust, a mapped sacrifice. Cost is for widows and their priests. Cost is for men with chairs who forget why they sat." The Emperor answers. He steals a millimeter of time, spends it on cutting the heat along Sakazuki's knuckles with a sentence. "Do not touch children." The lava flinches as if remembering a photo in a wallet. The Admiral notices. His lips thin, then flatten. Nulls exert. The air falls towards zero. The Emperor's field thins further, a ribbon he must braid tighter. He refuses to hate the blanks. He has loved and used their cousins elsewhere. He accepts their purchase on his nerves the way a monk accepts hunger. Name it, endure it. Do not let it purchase your choices. Sakazuki changes angle. This world burns. I am the hand on the pump. You will not preach to men hauling buckets. He shows him a picture instead of a sermon. Egghead lifters rising over a blockade, guns lowering. A child not crushed by a cable because a hand shaped the air. It is not spectacle. It is a receipt. Buckets are for floods, he says. Not for fires you start to justify your salary. Magma arrives, efficient, mountain-born. Gold meets it, not with contempt, but architecture, arch, buttress, keystone. The gnolls draw closer, thinning the architectures to their bones. Both men bleed restraint. Both men intend to be the last restraint the world ever requires. The sign arrives from below, not above. Drums, not many. 2. A rhythm like a heart unashamed of being loved. The elevator cage hums with it. Tsuru looks down the shaft, eyes sharpening through 1,000 meters of air. Kizaru listens with the sideways smile of a man who enjoys the scandal of hope. That's why, Chun. The drums of liberation are not for courts. They do not take notes. They remind. A beat that lived in a century's missing page climbs the tower like ivy. It slips under armor. It sneaks under dogma. It taps a question on Sakazuki's sternum. When you were a boy, what did you want to protect? For a fraction of a second, Magma remembers a warm kitchen and the discipline of a mother's tired hands. It hesitates. The Emperor uses the hesitation to step not backward, not forward, but sideways into a choice that refuses to turn this clash into a preamble for civil war. He lowers his palm. Tsuru opens her hands. Enough, she says, but she says it like a hymn. Sakazuki feels the drum stop. He looks at the Emperor and sees a man who could have broken him, chose not to, and did not ask for witness. He hates and respects. He withdraws one pace, not in concession, but in logistics. Reach the throne then, he says, and be crushed by its silence. The elevator continues. The tower's maw opens into terraces cut with immaculate cruel beauty. Procession lanes widen. Choir balconies carry no choir. The Pangaea stairs rise in a cascade of white. Golden guards part. Blanks line the edges, their gaze diluting every trick he might be tempted to use. He walks. He bleeds less. He hurts more. The mesh makes a small, unhappy noise with every step. Men on the terraces hold tablets, seal stamps ready. Women with ledger eyes watch him like an earthquake under a courthouse. They pass a chapel built into a wall, its pews empty, its altar polished by generations of knees. He stops a heartbeat inside, not to respect their God, but to respect the idea of kneeling when you decide to kneel. Tsuru waits at the door, unamused by piety, but devout regarding form. Kizaru studies a stained glass pane where light pretends to be law and seems embarrassed at its acting. He reaches the courtyard of the empty throne. Flowering trees rustle their silk, forced to bloom at a schedule written by climate engineers. The air carries a faint sweetness of water kept from the poor. A long carpet cuts a line to the dais where an absence sits, named as policy, fed as God. The audience is a silence, not an absence of sound, a presence of listening. 5 figures do not sit, because symbols prefer posture to comfort. The elder from Egghead stands among them. A bead of sweat nowhere, patience everywhere. Holy knights flank the dais. CP0 file in lines pretending to be shadows. The blanks thicken into a human ring at the foot of the steps, like a halo turned inward. He approaches. He does not draw the sword. It would be discourteous. He does not kneel. It would be dishonest. He stops where a ruler stopping would be a threat, and a petitioner stopping would be an insult. He chooses a third distance. Audit. Emperor, the elder says, and the word tastes like a lawsuit over water rights. You are before the empty throne. You will be judged. By whom? He asks. Not an argument. A clarification request to a clerk, polite and fatal. The dais breathes, not with lungs, with allocation. The air cools as if someone removed 30,000 expectations from the room. A shape that is not light and not shadow stands where absence had been crowned. It does not move. It is the silhouette of a decision that never discusses itself. Imu is not a name spoken. It is written in policy. The shape's gaze does not fall on him. It falls through him and inventories where he has been. It finds a city held together by lies that he made useful. It finds a throne that imprisoned himself. It finds children who learned the shape of the sky by watching him refuse to bend. It finds the wound, notes the mesh, and dismisses both. His field shrinks. Here Null is not a mineral or a person. It is the room. Seastone hangs in the air ground fine and suspended in a charge he cannot negotiate. He tightens his law until it is a wire drawn by a jeweler. It cuts and holds and trembles. The shape does not speak. It projects, not words, outcomes. O'Hara burning, books turn to weather. Lulusia stung out of existence from a blue nowhere. The populace nodding not because they believe, but because they intend to survive. It shows him order as a shelter purchased by theft he is invited to ignore. It offers him a chair at the edge of a system as compensation for refusing to be the system. He answers because refusal must also be language. He projects a different set of outcomes. Egghead intact, Marines drifting instead of firing, a boy with a straw hat watching a sword refuse to celebrate itself. He shows law as a habit, not a weapon. He shows mercy as capital, invested and reported quarterly. The shape narrows, not insulted. Curious the way a tide is curious about cliffs. It plants a thought like a flag on a hill. Peace, purchased by silence. He plants a thought beside it. Peace purchased by consent. The hill looks the same to the weak. The difference is the weather you gift your children. The elder tilts his head. A clerk noting an argument and readying a stamp with the outcome already engraved. We are ancient, he says. We are intact. Your youth is dangerous. Your wounds leak into other men's sons. Tsuru stands 3 steps behind, close enough to catch his words if he falls and far enough to avoid being litigated by proximity. Kizaru's gaze distance is measured in centimeters and sins. He looks at the blanks. They do not look back. Trained absence refuses to reciprocate. He respects their craft. He will not despise them for being used. He has done worse with better men. He speaks for the first time aloud to the room. I do not kneel, he says. I submit to audit. He spreads his hands patient. Audit me. The shape does, with brutality. It runs fingers made of precedent down the years of his empire and pulls out each line. It shows him where a planet died because he called dusk dawn to keep his line standing. It shows him where a sun broke because an oath was framed without room for failure. It shows him the machine that eats him, the men who worship the eating, and the children who forget that bread is not a miracle but a labor. He accepts each blow. He does not argue the true ones. He corrects the false ones not for pride but to keep the ledger accurate. When it is done, he does not ask clemency. He asks for next steps. 3 notes, he says. Voice lower, steady. I will not be your hand. I will not be your symbol. I will be your mirror. Mirrors make thrones furious. They show angles that portraits avoid. The shape grows colder, not in temperature, in allocation. The blanks step half a pace closer without moving. CP0 breathes shallower with enthusiasm they will deny under questioning. He senses the room's operating constraints as clearly as a fencer feels his weight on his forefoot. He maps them for himself and his allies in a cleaner, quieter thought. Here, constructs damp by an order of magnitude. Any law written in air decays like foam. Percipient will, Haki, holds longer than equations. Seastone micro-aerosols impose a base tax on miracles. Blanks stack the tax to a surcharge. Any projection longer than 6 heartbeats risks dissolving into compliance. He sets himself under those limits and decides. "You will give me terms," he says to the shape. "Not chains. I will accept a mandate, not a leash." The shape shows him a world with fewer pirates, because the poor were frightened, not because they were fed. It shows him a map with empty spaces burned clean. It shows him a throne that plans to outlive the names of its makers. It offers him a cloak cut from the flag of silence. He declines. "My cloak is threadbare," he says, "but it lets me hear men when they cry." The elder breathes in through his nose, out through the word, law. "You will exit by judgment or by ash," he reminds, bureaucratic as a knife in a drawer. The room waits for a trick. He refuses tricks. He asks the only question the honest ask in enemy halls. "Who do you fear?" Silence tightens. The shape does not answer, but the floor does. Under the dais, stone hums a low spilled promise. The rhythm that walked the tower finds this room and chooses not to knock. The windows flicker with wind that hates curtains. A sign, divine in the sense that it insults offices, passes through, not a god. The idea of joy moving like a weather front. Leaves on the courtyard trees flip their undersides to the light. A blank forgets to be absent for 1/4 of a breath. Tsuru's jaw relaxes. Kizaru's shoulders slip down 2 millimeters as if a weight lifted that he had not been officially carrying. The shape on the throne does not move. It cannot acknowledge weather without ceding its monopoly on climate. "Reach the throne," Tsuru says softly, not advising, not pleading, naming the path and the cost. He climbs the steps, 1 pace, another. Blanks bend the air until it is like walking into snow made of decisions. He refuses to hate them. He has asked worse things of better men. At the foot of the dais, he stops where the shape's absence presses like an avalanche made of etiquette. "Here," he says. He opens his palm. He does not draw the sword. He draws a law the room cannot fully eat. A boundary around children, small and stubborn, written in Haki he has taught his breath to carry. It isn't beautiful. It is effective. It makes no spectacle. It will be expensive to sustain. It will be adopted by men who never learn his name. The shape tests it. It holds. Not because it is stronger than null, but because the blank closest to it is a father who remembers a question his daughter asked before sleep. The man does not move. The law writes itself in him, without him knowing it has been adopted. He lets the law go. He does not plant flags. He refuses the pageantry of triumph. He looks up through the empty where a god would be, and speaks not a defiance but a dessert menu. 3 options, priced in blood and grace. Return with my memory attenuated, your world unbothered, my debt resumed. Free agent in your waters, schism guaranteed, sanctioned servant, autonomy bled, impact maximal. He does not choose yet. He is not allowed, not by the story or by his own habit of deliberation. He watches the way the shape flinches at the second path and pretends not to at the third. He files the flinch. He will be generous with its implications in a later room. The elder completes the ceremony with hands that never shake. Inquiry concludes. Judgment enters preparation, he says, each syllable notarized by tradition. You will be held under null until the council writes its decision. He bows to the room, not to the throne. He bows to the idea of rooms where men talk instead of burn. He turns back to Tsuru. Her logbook is open. The page is blank. She will write honest things in it, and perhaps never be permitted to read them to anyone. On the way down, the holy knights flank him as if escort with tenderness. The blanks maintain their weather. Kizaru falls in 2 steps behind. A sigh he will bill to someone later. Tsuru keeps pace and says nothing until the elevator doors close on silence. You made a law in a room designed to prevent laws from being born, she says finally, and allows herself one nod. Ugly, useful. He breathes once, the mesh biting in time with his pulse. I will be uglier yet if the price buys better bread. You'll have to be, she says. They intend you to choose the leash. Power scaling. Interlude. 2. Within Pangea's null saturations, Oath constructs operate at 1/5 normal coherence and decay to noise after 6 heartbeats and less anchored in living will. Haki engraved boundaries persist if hosted by trained minds. Long predictions collapse into compliance if routed through the throne's aura. Seastone aerosols impose constant discomfort equivalent to low-level, untouchable proximity. Direct conflict against throne-adjacent blanks risks definitional wounds rather than tissue damage. The elevator halts halfway. The tower's ribs groan with the weight of a moving decision. Mid-transit again. Interception again. This time, not magma, not judgment, but something built to be the mirror he did not choose at Egghead. A holy knight whose vow is the optimization of his flaw. Silver helm, law-bright cuirass, seastone filigree woven into every buckle. The knight's voice is patient as a well. I am Sir Candidus. I serve the peace of obedience. Your mercy causes rumors. The council would prefer mercy curated. He recognizes the offer. A managed conscience, a subscription model for kindness, scaled by permit. Mirror, he says, not unkind. You will show me what happens if I turn mercy into a department. Candidus raises a blade whose edge hums like a pen before signature. The clash is short by design and concept. Seastone threads punish flourish. Oath meets decree under a roof that eats angels. He cuts only once. The cuff from the knight's gauntlet. The threads inside glitter. He could have cut the wrist. He did not. Candidus recognizes the choice. He steps back. Reach the throne, he says. Old law disguised as threat. He withdraws with dignity that will write a memo about his bruises later and ask for budget. The elevator descends. The air gets a fraction kinder. He can taste weather again. The mesh stops hissing and settles into an unhappy marriage with his arm. Kizaru rolls his neck and pretends it is stiffness, not relief. Tsuru looks at the logbook and decides whether to file today under losses averted or victories deferred. At the bottom, the flagship waits under the tower like a pen under a lawyer's hand. Vegapunk stands on the gangway where he should not be allowed. He looks smaller and more alive than any man with 7 degrees should be. The Marine captain is there too, hat in hand, not out of deference, but because salt has glued it to his fingers. Verdict? Vegapunk asks, knowing there is none yet. Asking anyway because men who build prefer data to riddles. Later, the Emperor says, but there is a mandate disguised as a threat. Tsuru shuts her logbook with a quiet click. You have one night, she tells him. They will write the leash in the morning. He nods. He remains standing until the deck remembers him and sets itself under his feet with loyalty. He looks out to sea. The horizon is a knife he has sharpened too often in other worlds. Here it brightens, as if someone were laughing a long way off, and the sound had decided to practice being sunrise. The Elder's message arrives in the light. No words, only allocations. Ships move without orders. Guards change without footsteps. The world's machine flexes like a bag prepared to carry weight. It will insist on advertising as generosity. He watches it and decides where to place the first chisel. He walks the flagship's corridor toward a small Medici chapel where men breathe into masks and women sign cross letters over wounds, and nobody asks whether the god they pretend to use is listening. He sits because the surgeon taps his gauntlet, and even emperors obey good medics. She adjusts the mesh with rough softness and swears an oath under her breath to no one that he pretends he didn't hear. Tsuru waits outside, back against the bulkhead, eyes on the door like a mother convinced that watching the handle keeps sickness from entering. Kizaru disappears to get tea, which is Marine for find a quiet corner to think treason without being caught. The Marine captain stares at the sea and wonders if resigning in the morning would be braver than staying and teaching his juniors how to stand without permission. He closes his eyes with intention, not exhaustion. He does not sleep. He practices choosing. He rehearses the shapes of the 3 paths in the muscles of his face because faces must hold law. He thinks of chairs, decks, and altars. He sets his jaw around the only one he can bear. The mesh cools. The nulls outside sigh with the tide. The ship breathes. He rises when a bell notes the turn of a watch, then walks back to the deck. Pangaea glows like a lie told so often it developed its own sunset. The elevator tower watches with cathedral patience. The elder watches with weather patience. The silhouette on the dais does not watch. It is watched by its own instructions, a prison built from the inside. He breathes, and the night breathes back. The drums of liberation do not sound again, which is mercy. Too much joy turns men reckless. He will need them patient tomorrow. When dawn slants over the red line, someone somewhere laughs quietly and tries the laugh on like a boot. He smiles despite himself and files the smile as contraband. Ancestry thirsty Adamai. He will go back up the tower. He will accept pageantry as road. He will enter the room where men alphabetize wars and put love under L and pretend they forgot to file it. He will choose in front of them because choices are more contagious when they are witnessed. He watches the sea turn from iron to coin to mirror. He refuses to see himself in it. He intends to see the children who will drink from it without paying a fee to someone who holds a stamp instead of a net. Morning burns the salt out of the air and leaves iron. He stands on the flagship's deck the way a beam stands in a roof, load-bearing, unadorned. The summons comes on a wind that doesn't move flags. Return to Pangaea Castle for judgment and correction. He looks once at Egghead's horizon. Lifters are dots, the rails are ghosts. The sea waits to ruin all mirrors. He steps onto the light road again and climbs. He enters the courtyard as if entering a kiln. The blanks thicken. The null mist is polite about hurting him. Golden guards mirror each other. The elder is a patience that drinks its own reflection. The shape sits where absence has been trained to sit. The drums are quiet. The plants pretend to be ornamental and fail to hide that they are witnesses. A corridor of attention leads him to the dais. He stops at audit distance. The shape weighs him without curiosity and opens 3 panels in the air. Not images, not words. Possible worlds hung like dark paintings. The first is a door home. He sees the throne that eats him. The 10,000-year candle burning at both ends and the forest in the middle already char. He sees himself step through, and memory leafs him like an old book. First the corners curl, then the ink bleeds, then the pages stick. He sees a galaxy spared this world's quarrels because he is too busy dying in the one that claims him. The second is a sea road with no flags. He walks it as a free agent. His law is his alone. It is pure and lonely. Marines split over him, some follow his shadow, some hunt it. The revolution is warmed and chilled by him in alternating gusts. Cities live and die by whether they heard he was nearby that month. Schism follows him like weed trailing a keel. The third is a seal stamped on his wrist. Sanction. He goes where the chair sends him. He saves more lives than he wants to count. He is listed in minutes and measured in budgets. Men interpret him to have avoided deciding. Men die anyway when he chooses badly with a stamp's help. He is weapon and bandage at once. He is maximal and owned. The panels shut at the same speed, like eyelids trained to never show the speed they prefer. The elder's voice is winter. Path 3 is adult. Path 2 is juvenile. Path 1 is a tantrum disguised as duty. Choose. He does not answer the elder. He speaks to Tsuru without looking at her, because respect is not volume. Blood price, he says. Speak it plain. She does. She has always. Path 1. You go and forget, and we keep burning tidy and slow. Path 2. We bleed twice. Schism, then crackdown. Widows learn new words for orphan. Path 3. You become their excuse and our map. We save more than we lose. We lose what makes saving worth reading out loud. She flips her logbook shut. I prefer an audit with teeth. The Marine captain, allowed in the back row by mistake or malice, clears his throat like a man rolling a barrel up a hill, because it must go somewhere. Sir, he says to no one in particular, to everyone. Give us a rule we can carry in our jaws when bullets make it hard to think. Kizaru watches the sun bounce off gold, as if it were an old friend and a disappointed teacher. Pick 3, he murmurs to the air, tone lightly obscene for a cathedral. Then make it behave like 2. He turns his face to the shape on the dais. I accept sanction, he says, and the word is stone dropped in water. Not leash. I accept a mandate, relief and audit. The syllables land like brackets on a line that had sprawled too much. The air does not move. The blanks do. The closest 3 breathe half a beat deeper than trained. Barely enough to fog glass, not enough to commit a crime. The elder tilts his head and hears future memo screaming. Kizaru's mouth remembers almost smiling. Tsuru, uncharacteristically, says nothing, not for lack of words, but because language sunsets at some altitudes. He raises his hand. The mesh bites the bruise. Pain is a pen he borrows. Here are my boundaries, he says, and names them not as favors, but as laws. No child harmed by state or pirate under my eye. No buster call without a prior corridor, announced and enforced for evacuation. 2 independent signatures, marine and civil, before shells leave brass. Seastone limited in civilian densities, its dust banished from food, water and air. Surrender corridor. Every battle must present one. Fighters who choose it live to be citizens get. Record keepers on scene empowered by law, not theatre. Tsuru's ledgers and others like hers will travel with my work. My field operates at defined stations. Rescue, ceasefire, and audit only. No crown, no tribute, no thrones. If I violate this oath, I leave. If you violate it with my name, I burn the permit and keep the mandate. He turns to the blanks. You will host 2 of these laws in your hearts. You are trusted with silence. Now be trusted with noise. He does not move closer. He does not put his hand on their shoulders. Their weather flows into his bones anyway, like river into bedrock. The shape stares without eyes. The room resists becoming precedent. It fails by a fraction that justice will magnify later. Sanction is granted, the elder says, voice wrapped in paperwork. Title, Auditor of Mercy. Access, limited. Scope, global. Oversight, council. He answers with a word that is kind only when it is sharp. No. Then he gives them an alternate shape that can be filed. Oversight. Publication. Every intervention will be recorded. Den will be present. If you gag, I leave. If you edit, I leave. If you obey, I stay. The sentence is not a negotiation. It is an invoice and a receipt. Kizaru says too softly for any transcript. Troublesome. and stands straighter. Tsuru opens the logbook and writes without looking. Auditor of Mercy. Boundaries noted. Publication clause dangerous and necessary. She underlines nothing. She underlines everything by existing. The shape tests him. The null mist thickens. The mesh sings its ugly marriage song. The wound in his shoulder opens a little and then refuses. He holds his field under 6 heartbeats and lets it decay rather than wrestle it into compliance with a room. He will not perform law here. He will perform it where water and screaming lower the ceiling. The sanction's visual moves like weather across him. The gold does not glitter. It dulls to daylight on metal, honest as a tool. The aquila on his chest flattens into a compass. 4 arms like a log poses stubborn points, then grows wings, not for flight, for aim. The new sigil is bright without boasting, a sun compass, lines for direction, rays for kindness, winged only enough to remind that mercy must move. He fixes the sigil with a thumb. He does not kiss it. He has kissed too many banners into lying. He lets the image do its work without worshipping it. The shape acknowledges with silence that counts as a treaty in this room. You will be deployed, the elder says, tasting the word like strong medicine he intends to dilute. Under advisement. Under need, he corrects, and leaves the dais without turning his back. Tsuru meets him under the nearest tree. She does not congratulate. She appraises. We will win some, she says. We will be punished for most. I will keep your receipts. I will judge you. Do, he says. Mercy without audit turns into theatre. Theatre saves pride, not lives. Kizaru edges closer. The light around him less lazy because it likes the compass. Your outfit, he says, tone as thin as paper cut. It will ruin a tailor's day. Tailors keep cities alive, he answers, and Kizaru's almost smile passes for an oath. He descends, retakes the light road, and returns to the ship because mandates are not miracles. They are roots. On the deck, the Marine captain salutes and does not care who sees. Vegapunk, who has stayed against reasonable advice, wipes his face with a sleeve and fails to hide 3 expressions in a row. Relief, grief, resolve. Clause of relief, the doctor says, reading the title off the air as if it had been typed there by someone with bad penmanship. I can help codify with rails. You will build stations, he says, on islands, ships, slums. Rails that enforce corridors, capture proof and refuse to be theatre. Vegapunk nods, a soldier inside his lab coat finally allowed to admit it. We'll call them daylight posts, he says, because engineers can't help naming things to keep them from falling apart. He carries the new emblem in his gait, not just on his chest. He looks at the sea. The sea looks back like a clerk who knows you have a signed permit and plans to check 3 times anyway. He offers his ankle to the bite. It bites. He proceeds. The first deployment is written on air by a screaming snail, broadcast from a blue town on a sea lane that never gets stories named after it. A noble's flagboat has mistaken hunger for piracy, children for leverage. Marines have ringed houses with rifles out of fear and doctrine. The elder would prefer a discreet massacre and a discreet apology later. The auditor of mercy lands and writes instead. Rails bloom in thin lines across alley mouths. Light tessellates above streets, not bright enough to blind, bright enough to oblige. Nulls arrive in uniform, borrowed for a day, and stand where Seastone would have sat in lungs. He speaks once on the Dendon. Corridor declared, children exempt, surrender offered. His voice finds its way into kitchens like steam. Men with rifles hear a law that will ruin their careers if they disobey and save their daughters if they obey. They lower barrels, tethers loosen. 20 pirates, 8 very ashamed Marines, and a corrupt clerk walk into sunlight. They are measured by ledger keepers, tagged for consequence, spared for future, documented for publication. He does not hold a press conference. He has made the street the press. He pays cost. Seastone overlays sting until he tastes old iron behind his teeth. The Yamigura bruise argues with the mesh like a married couple late at night. He files the pain and writes another small law into air and into backs and wrists and hearts that refuses to be eaten by a room. At dusk, he steps into a chapel where the idol is no idol. It is a shelf for bread. Tsuru is already there, writing. She does not look up. 2 Marines lied, she says. 3 pirates lied better. Publish both lies. Publish both truths. Punish all 4. Done, he says. Also, she adds dry as paper, you were wrong about a window. The wind would not have carried smoke that way. See the drawing. She slides it over without looking. He corrects the record with a small pen and a large feeling named thank you. In the 2nd month, the sanction is tested at a scale meant to blow out its fuses. An entire archipelago goes into revolt after a food tax is raised to pay for an empty chair's birthday. The council issues orders that read like a sigh and sound like a grindstone. He arrives with a ledger and a blade. He writes corridors between islands. He obligates ships to carry grain before guns. He places blanks at gates where young men with pretty flags would have turned into ghosts. He eats 3 assassination attempts on the same afternoon and converts 2 of them into sworn testimony that makes a minister's career explode on live den. He does not spare everyone. He spares enough for later to exist. He learns to love publication. Not the applause, a disease, nor the outrage, another disease, but the ink. He drags the story into daylight and sits next to it until it behaves. He cannot carry 10,000 stories. He carries a dozen and instructs 100 men to carry a dozen each. He learns to delegate to men who do not kneel, and he is cured of an old arrogance. He bleeds every time a seastone lattice hums. He scalds himself occasionally on the memory of a galaxy he let wait. He writes more small laws inside breath than big ones inside sky. He finds, with embarrassing joy, that this work tastes like bread in the hand, not song in the hall. Blackbeard watches the new sigil multiply on daylight posts and laughs until his ribs ache. Zehaha. He toasts the horizon. A shiny clerk with a sword. He thinks publication will stop hunger for a crown. Let's make a null into print. He sends Lafitte to learn how to forge a corridor. He sends Shiryu to cut rails. He eats a priest's sermon for dessert and calls it justice. Sakazuki shackles his anger to doctrine with a chain that squeals. He signs orders he hates because they tell his men not to waste ammunition on witnesses. He signs orders he loves because they tell his men to move faster than pity. He fights pirates and publishers with equal distaste. He misses when life was simple enough to be wrong in private. Kizaru becomes courier between contradictory suns. He is late to meetings where he is supposed to wag his finger and arrives on time to street corners where he is supposed to teach an ensign to point his gun at a door jamb instead of a silhouette. He drinks bad tea with ledger keepers and listens to their dull, perfect stories until he knows how to stand longer without a joke. The elder cultivates optics like orchids. He allows him on some islands and bans him from others. He permits victories that can be claimed later as policy and starves interventions that would produce a narrative he cannot spend. He tightens Seastone distribution with a smile meant for the minute. He writes his own publication, a slow drip of stories in which the auditor of mercy reinforces the legitimacy of the rooms he hates. Vegapunk builds rails in places that don't know how to be saved yet. Daylight posts appear in port towns that had only ever met dawn as a rumor. He trains interns to be ledger keepers when Marines won't let him send Tsuru's people. He hides codes in the rail's handshake that make corruption boring and kindness convenient. Boring saves worlds, convenient keeps them saved. Revolutionary Dragon reads the publication clause and grins in a wind that smells like rain and letters. We will learn to be outflanked by sunlight, he tells a daughter he misses. We will learn to love it. Then we will set it on fire when it wavers. He renews his people's commitment, not simply to overthrow but to build under scrutiny. He hates the shape of the throne's shadow less because it has become measurable. The shape's shadow endures. Imu does not speak. The room speaks for it. It adds a new office whose function is to starve publication by making it dull. It creates committees that sop up outrage and turn it into oatmeal. It tries to cost him away by increasing null taxes wherever he is popular. He pays and pays. He does not spend admiration. He spends hours. Late in the third month, in a town that did not exist in any encyclopedia, until a ledger keeper wrote its name in blue ink. A pirate captain throws down his pistol, palms up, in a corridor that the rails have enforced for 20 minutes, and the will of a single blank has enforced for 21. The captain is 22. He is shaking. He expects death because stories taught him to. A Marine corporal with a day's growth of beard and a tattoo he regrets, nods at his own ledger keeper to write the surrender down. He tapes the captain's wrists with cloth instead of rope, because rope will tell the wrong story later. He mutters, "I," and the syllable is an oath to no one and everyone. The auditor of mercy watches from the corner where the rail meets the road. He feels the mesh hum. He feels the bruise complain. He files both. He watches a child draw his sigil in the dust, winged compass, sun discreet, and add, because children are better designers than emperors, a little hat at a silly angle that makes the sun look like it intends to laugh. He does not correct the drawing. At night, he hears drums, not in towers, in alleys, not a legend, a practice. He watches the shape of joy rehearse being policy. He leaves 2 ledgers under 2 pillows and instructs a third that has never met a pillow to take one instead of a knife. He receives finally a message from a galaxy that never learned how to share him. It is not a plea, it is a cough. He replies with a promissory note that tells no lie he cannot survive. He says, "This work here buys that work their heir." He is an honest debtor for the first time in a long time, and hates how good it feels to stop stealing from himself. He keeps a small ritual. Every time Seastone bites so hard his hand shakes afterward, he finds a bakery and pays for 3 loaves and does not tell anyone why. He calls it purge. He calls it healing. He calls it a tax to a god he doesn't believe in, so the god will leave him alone. He refuses to become beloved. He refuses to become hated. He keeps becoming present. On a winter morning, when all the flags along the line between 2 nations try to be indifferent and fail, he walks through a market with no seeable guard because the guard is publication. Tsuru walks 2 steps to his left and says, "Boundaries clause holds. For now." He nods and gives her a roll of bread. She takes it without saying thank you because gratitude is work, and they have already done enough. In a sky that never cared about empires except as reasons to have weather, the new sigil travels. It is stamped into rails. It is sketched in chalk by children who cannot afford chalk. It is carved into a bench by a fisherman waiting for a boat that took on too much debt. It is scrawled on the inside of a marine helmet where hate used to be. It is painted discreetly on a revolutionary satchel, because sometimes even insurgency needs to borrow a halo. Citizens repeat a sentence and do not realize it is a law. He shows up. They say it when an island floods and the rails decide to be bridges. They say it when an ensign holds fire with both hands and remembers a girl with a wooden sword and a father who looked at a photo under a helm. They say it when a noble's auction ends in ledger lines and apologies instead of chains. Blackbeard, drunk on his own weather, sharpens a plan. Publication is a mirror, he slurs to Shiryu. Mirrors can be smashed or dirtied. Bring me dirt. Bring me a lens that makes him look like the thing I am. Zahaha. He sends Van Augur to learn how light lies. He sends Lafitte to learn how men prefer lies that absolve them. He plans a theft of a daylight post and an execution by story. The elder polishes a phrase he intends to say at a banquet about public-private partnerships for justice, and hopes it makes the auditor sound like a subcontractor. He fails to notice a small boy crawl under the table and draw the sun compass on the underside with gravy. He fails to hear the drums because there are too many plates. Kizaru at last says it where someone can write it down. Justice without style is hard to sell. Justice with style is dangerous. Let's learn dangerous. He offers training in light painting to ledger keepers because aesthetics is a weapon and ledger keepers deserve knives. Vegapunk writes a second code into Rails. If publication fails, archive to a place the sea itself will gossip about. He gets a letter in a basket one night that reads, "Taught 2 blanks to host a law. Please send portable sea stone overlays that don't itch as much." He writes back with a design and the word sorry, then erases sorry and writes keep going. He returns on a quiet day when the sea is an accountant having a smoke to Egghead. The little girl who did not get crushed by a crane stands very straight and says, "Thank you, and also, I have a complaint." He kneels to hear it. "You didn't wave at me when you left," she says. He nods gravely. "I will correct the record." He waves now. She salutes with both hands and drops her sandwich. He climbs the light road again once, because ceremony must be fed occasionally to keep it from eating worse things. He stands in the courtyard and reads his ledger aloud. 3 names he failed, 10 names he saved, 2 names he will find again. The shape does not applaud. Tsuru writes. Kizaru hums. The blanks host their 2 laws without knowing they do. The elder floats budgets across the air like a man juggling tax and fear. He leaves a small plaque behind on a bench under a tree. It reads, in a hand that thinks it can repair chairs by writing on wood. Mercy is a schedule. Audit is a promise. Bread is a result. No one signs it. It doesn't matter. The galaxy keeps coughing. He keeps answering with work. He stores minutes like a miser saves coins. He spends them violently at sites of need and reluctantly at rooms of comfort. He refuses to retire a single verb that saved a boy in a ditch, a woman on a boat, a marine with a gun he did not fire. On a night so clear the sky looks like it has rehearsed for centuries to be this clean. He steps onto a rooftop above a port where ledger keepers sleep for once. He looks up. The stars are not his. They are the world's. He tells them out loud because some rituals are best whispered into the possibility of eavesdroppers what his mandate is. I will show up, he says. I will bind the strongest first and leave the weakest for last so they can grow into something I do not have to save. I will publish. I will bleed. I will leave if I lie. He does not wait for an answer. He turns and climbs down into a street that smells like bread and ink and a little bit of sea stone. He walks to a daylight post and checks his rails by hand, because kings who don't touch their bridges are tourists. In a small house above that street, a mother tells her child a story. She says, once there was a man who carried a compass that had a sun on it, because the north changes when you feed people. He had a sword that wrote rules and a hand that held bread. The child asks, what does he do? The mother says, he shows up. They sleep without listening for boots. Beyond the clouds, in a place that would call this ocean small and be wrong, a throne sighs and burns and rests, because the sun has told it, briefly and truthfully. that he is buying it time with another coastline. The throne does not understand. It doesn't have to. The work is honest on both shores. That is rare. That is enough for tonight.